Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back to ancient Rome, where your life, your body and your future could all be handed over to a goddess before you even knew your multiplication tables. Imagine you're 6 years old, you're still losing baby teeth, you've just learned how to write your name in wax tablets, and suddenly you're being taken from your home and told that you now belong to Vesta. Forever. Okay, not technically forever, only 30 years, but when you're 6, that may as well be an eternity, and the craziest part? It's considered an honour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know what time it is where you are and what city you're watching from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the atrium of your family's domus, barefoot on cold marble, as your parents make nervous eye contact with a group of stern-looking men in official togas. They're here from the Pontifex Maximus, the High Priest of Rome, and they've come with a decision. It turns out your family meets all the criteria. You're of noble blood. Your mother and father are both alive, a requirement that's weirdly specific, and you're pure, whatever that means when you're 6. Which is to say, you've never been married, and no one's accused you of even looking sideways at a boy. The men ask you to step forward. They look at your posture, your teeth, your eyes. It feels more like being auctioned than honoured. And then, one nods. Just one. And that's it. You've been chosen. From this moment on, you're a Vestal Virgin, servant of the goddess Vesta, protector of Rome's sacred flame, and one of the most powerful and dangerously symbolic women in the empire. Now let's pause and be real for a second. You probably won't survive this. There are many ways to mess up in this role, and only a handful of paths to retire gracefully. Still, this is one of the few ways a woman in ancient Rome can have status, independence, and a direct connection to the divine. The downside? It's more of a high-stakes hostage situation than a religious internship. They escort you from your house to the house of the Vestals, just behind the Temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum. It's beautiful, luxurious even, with a private courtyard, running water and mosaic floors. But it's also a cage. No going home. No seeing your family except on rare feast days. No friends outside your fellow priestesses. You belong to Vesta now, literally and legally. The other Vestals greet you. There are 6 in total, and they each occupy a place in the hierarchy. 2 novices like yourself, 2 in the middle years of service, and 2 elders nearing retirement. You're told about the 3 decades ahead. First 10, learn the rituals. Second 10, perform the rituals. Third 10, train the new girls. At the end of it, if you've survived without scandal, without extinguishing the sacred flame, and without being buried alive, you get a generous pension and permission to marry, though good luck finding a husband after a lifetime of being worshipped and feared. And here's the twist no one talks about in the textbooks. Many girls didn't want to leave when their 30 years were up. Not because they loved the job, though some did, but because re-entering normal Roman society after decades of being treated as half goddess, half captive was terrifying. You weren't just a priestess, you were a living symbol of the empire's purity. And purity, in this case, had a long shadow. The goddess you serve, Vesta, is kind of a mystery. She doesn't have temples full of statues or myths about love affairs and drama. She's the goddess of the hearth, home fire, community, continuity. Her symbol isn't a spear or thunderbolt. It's a fire that never goes out. And keeping that fire burning, that's your job now. Your sacred job. And if it ever goes out, oh boy. We'll get into the fire stuff soon, but first, let's talk about the real power behind this so-called honour, politics. See, the Vestal Virgins aren't just religious figures, they're political pawns. Your family's name just got boosted by your appointment. It's like your dad just landed a seat in the Senate. And Rome needs that, especially during periods of instability. Every time the Republic or Empire starts wobbling, people turn back to tradition, to old gods, to safe symbols. And you fresh little 6-year-old with pigtails and no idea what you're in for, are now one of those symbols. And here's a weird fact for your mental pocket. In the early days of the Vestals, they were probably buried alive in a literal underground cell if they broke their vows. But by the time the Empire rolled around, it wasn't technically an execution. No. Rome was very clear that virgins couldn't be executed directly. So they built a little underground chamber with a couch, some food, and a tiny oil lamp. They'd lock you inside and say, well, we didn't kill her. The gods did. That's Roman loopholes for you. There's also a bit of debate around how much choice these girls actually had. Some scholars argue that families saw this as a path to prestige and pressured their daughters into it. Others think there was a little more agency involved, especially in later centuries. But when you're 6, the concept of agency is more theoretical than practical. You probably didn't even get to choose your own tunic colour. Still, as brutal as it sounds, this position wasn't all doom and gloom. The Vestals had legal rights most Roman women could only dream of. You could own property, make a will, and bypass most male authority. People stepped aside when you passed. If a condemned criminal bumped into you on the street, they were automatically pardoned. Your touch was considered so sacred that oaths sworn in your presence were legally binding. It's like being a spiritual celebrity with diplomatic immunity. But at the end of the day, you're still a little girl whose world has been turned upside down. You're sleeping in a new bed tonight, wrapped in stiff ceremonial linen, your hair braided in a complicated ancient pattern that supposedly mimics the fire itself. You're scared. You miss your mother. You don't understand why the fire is so important or what will happen if you let it go out. All you know is that your childhood ended before you really had one. And somewhere out there, in the heart of the temple, the sacred flame of Vesta burns, and it now depends on you. You wake before sunrise to the sound of soft sandals on stone. The senior Vestal glides past your room, and without a word you know it's time. You rub your eyes, yawn silently, and climb out of your narrow bed. The marble floor is cold. The air smells faintly of ash and roses, burnt offerings from the day before. You wrap your white stola around your shoulders and make your way toward the temple of Vesta, heart thudding under the weight of something you're only beginning to understand, responsibility. Today you're going to tend the flame. It sounds simple, right? Keep the fire burning. Don't let it go out. That's your job. But this isn't just any fire. This flame is sacred. It is the living, flickering spirit of Rome itself. People believe the empire will fall if the flame is extinguished. Entire armies have been recalled over it. Civil wars have been blamed on it. One little gust of wind, one careless blink, and it's your name that ends up on everyone's lips for the wrong reasons. The temple itself is unlike any other in Rome. It's round, not rectangular, with a domed roof that lets in a shaft of light by day and a glimpse of stars by night. No statue of the goddess lives here. Only the eternal flame, fed daily with finely selected wood and purified incense. No smoke can escape the temple without permission, and no outside flame can be brought in to relight it. If it goes out, you can't just spark it back up with a flint like some street cook. It has to be reborn using sacred friction, usually under the supervision of every religious authority in the city, and they'll all be watching you while they do it. You step inside, and the warmth greets you. The flame dances, alive and sharp, casting shadows against the polished stone. The other Vestals are already in place. 2 elder priestesses and 1 girl only a few years older than you. She motions for you to come forward and hands you a bundle of dry sticks tied with a white ribbon. You walk with slow, careful steps toward the altar. Every footfall echoes like thunder. You bend, your hands trembling slightly, and gently feed the wood into the fire. It catches quickly. The flames leap higher, golden and crackling. Good. Very good. You've done your part today. But don't think that means you're off the hook. The flame must be tended around the clock. There are shifts, rotations, ceremonies, and feast days. The fire is at the centre of them all. And because Rome is Rome, there are layers upon layers of meaning built into this single task. The flame isn't just warmth or light. It's purity, continuity, and the heartbeat of the Roman state. As long as it burns, Rome believes the gods are pleased. If it dies, well, something worse than death might be waiting. Let's rewind to a time the flame did go out. It's happened more than once in Roman history, and every time people absolutely lost their minds. Senators accused one another of corruption. Religious leaders threw around words like pollution and divine rage. In 206 BCE, during the Second Punic War, the flame reportedly flickered out, and everyone saw it as a sign that Rome was doomed against Hannibal. They performed emergency purification rituals. The Vestals were interrogated, sacrifices were made, and the message was clear: The gods were watching. Here's the strange part, though, and scholars still debate it. Some believe the flame may not have actually gone out in all those cases. It may have simply seemed dim, or there may have been political motivation to claim it had gone out, just to justify purging someone unpopular, like a scapegoat wrapped in linen. That's the thing about symbolism. It's easy to twist, hard to extinguish, and impossible to control once it spreads. Anyway, back to you. As a new acolyte, your early days mostly involve watching and learning. You study the way the fire is fed, the rhythm of the day's offerings, and the prayers whispered under breath. You memorize rituals that seem impossibly complex, chanted lines in archaic Latin, hand movements you have to get exactly right, and ceremonies that must be performed at specific lunar phases. Every little detail matters. A missed syllable, a misaligned garland, that's an omen. And omens, in Rome, are not taken lightly. You also begin to understand the deep weirdness of your role. You're a child, but people bow to you. You're cloistered, but you're powerful. You can't own a dog or a doll, but you can pardon a prisoner with a single touch. You're not a god, not a woman, not exactly a person anymore. You're a symbol, and as a symbol you're expected to be flawless. Quirk time. Did you know the Vestals used to make sacred mola salsa? It's a kind of salty flour mixture they'd sprinkle on animal sacrifices before they were burned. Sounds like no big deal, right? Just flour and salt. But no, it had to be milled with a special stone, only on certain days, while you were wearing a particular robe, and only Vestals could touch it. No one's quite sure why. Maybe it was purity, maybe it was tradition, or maybe some long-dead priest just really liked micromanaging. As the day wears on, you start to grasp the rhythm of your new life. Meals are taken in silence, except for prayers. There's a lot of walking, careful, ritualistic walking. You sweep certain halls with a specific broom. You gather laurel leaves. You attend lectures on ancient rites given by men with beards longer than your attention span. And always, someone is watching. Later that night you return to the temple one last time before sleep. The flame flickers, steady and bright, reflecting off the bronze fittings of the hearth. You watch it for a long time. You think about how it has been burning for centuries, tended by girls just like you, some of whom died for failing it. And now it's your turn. You kneel one last time, whisper a prayer you're still learning, and step back into the shadowed corridor. You're tired. Your back aches from sitting so straight all day. You miss your mother's hands braiding your hair. But deep down, part of you is proud. You kept the flame alive. You didn't let Rome down, at least not today. The first time you put on the full Vestal robes, you realize how heavy purity can feel, literally. The fabric is thick and layered, the color blindingly white, and the veil wraps around your head like a cloud that somehow tightens with every breath. Your arms disappear beneath the folds. You can barely move without feeling like you're about to knock over a sacred urn or trip on your own sanctity. And the hair? Oh, the hair! You thought your mother's braids were complicated, but now your head is a battlefield of ancient knots. The senicreens, that's what they call it, is a bridal hairstyle no bride gets to wear anymore. Only you and your fellow Vestals. You stand before a polished bronze mirror, unable to recognize yourself. The girl staring back at you looks like a statue, or maybe a ghost. All softness has been tucked away. You've become a symbol wrapped in linen and ritual. You don't smile. Vestals aren't supposed to smile in public, or frown, or really show any emotion that might suggest they have a life outside their duties. You are the image of perfect calm, perfect control, perfect silence. And if we're being honest, it's a little creepy. Still, as you adjust the infuler, the woolen bands that hang from your veil like sacred streamers, something stirs in your chest. A flicker of pride, maybe, or defiance. You are one of only 6 women in the Empire who wear this outfit. That alone carries weight. Everyone who sees you will step aside. Soldiers, senators, slaves. The old woman at the market will clutch her chest and mutter a prayer. Children will stare, unsure if you're real. And in that moment, you're not sure either. Let's talk about the rules that come with this outfit. Because they are many, and none of them make your life easier. First and foremost, there's the rule everyone knows. No sex. Ever. Not for 30 years. The vow of chastity is the sacred core of your service. If you break it, or even if someone suspects you did, the consequences are not just severe, they're horrifying. More on that later. You also can't attend parties. You can't go to the theatre without permission. You can't speak to strangers unless they speak first. You can't cry in public. You can't laugh loudly. And for the love of all the gods, don't run. Running is unseemly. It rustles the sacred linen. But your restrictions aren't just behavioural, they're spatial. There are places you can't go, not because they're dangerous, but because your presence would make them too holy. Fields could become cursed if a Vestal steps into them at the wrong time. Certain streets are off limits during specific festivals. Even funerals are mostly forbidden. Death is considered impure, and you are supposed to be the walking embodiment of sacred cleanliness. Yet here's the paradox. Despite all these limitations, you are also freer than almost any other woman in Rome. You have your own property, your own house. You answer to no man, not even your father. You can testify in court without a male guardian. You're escorted by lictors, those guys with the bundle of sticks meat axe weapon thing called a faces. That's the same honour given to high-ranking magistrates. And if a condemned prisoner crosses your path on the way to execution, and you claim it was a sign from the gods, that prisoner walks free. It's a weird blend of reverence and restriction. A paradox wrapped in white wool. Fun fact, your carriage is one of the few in Rome allowed to bypass traffic laws. While everyone else is stuck behind a smelly ox cart or a troop of marching soldiers, your vehicle rolls smoothly down the centre of the road. People clear out. Even the city's notoriously grumpy cart drivers don't dare shout at you. If they do, it's a criminal offence. The last thing anyone wants is to be cursed, or accused of disrespecting Vesta herself. Now, some historians believe all this legal power wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic. The state needed the Vestals to be powerful so that their symbolic role could be taken seriously. If you're going to be the living embodiment of Roman virtue, people have to believe you matter. So Rome gave you privileges that made you both respected and untouchable. You became a walking billboard for the empire's moral superiority. Of course, not everyone bought into it. Some whispered that Vestals were just glorified prisoners, that the white robes were just prettier chains, that all this honour was really just a lifetime of silent servitude. The debate still rages today. Were Vestals empowered or exploited? The truth, as always, probably lives somewhere in the messy middle. You shuffle through the forum, eyes cast just low enough to be humble, but high enough to be seen. You pass marble statues and burnt offerings, breathing in the scent of incense and city sweat. A few children stop playing and kneel as you pass. A man doffs his cap. A soldier thumps his fist over his chest. You don't react. You've practiced your face for this. Unreadable, calm, eternal. It's not easy. You want to wave at the little girl who reminds you of your sister. You want to roll your eyes at the senator pretending not to stare at your veil, but you don't. You're a symbol, and symbols don't blink. Here's a slightly more fringe detail. Some people believed that seeing a Vestal while thinking impure thoughts could bring down divine punishment. So yes, your walk through town is not just an appearance, it's a moral test for the people around you, which makes things pretty awkward if someone sneezes and drops a curse word as you pass. There were actual debates about whether such blunders required ritual cleansing or legal consequences. Rome really didn't do anything halfway. By the end of the day, your feet are aching, your shoulders are stiff from holding the ceremonial posture, and your head feels like it's been slowly squeezed by a woolen vice. You collapse onto your bed, veil carefully removed, and try to remember what life was like before this. Before the robes, before the rituals, before the weight of Rome's expectations crushed your lungs. And still, some part of you knows, beneath all the rules and symbols and suffocating fabric, there is something powerful in what you've become. You are feared, revered, watched, and obeyed. You're a girl no one dares touch, not even the gods. You wake up with a start, not from a nightmare, though you've had plenty of those since joining, but from the sound of footsteps, not the soft, ritual kind. These are fast, purposeful, and not part of any schedule you recognise. Someone is running through the house of the Vestals, which, if you've been paying attention, is not something anyone is allowed to do. Your heart picks up its pace. A chill runs down your arms, even under the wool. A novice rushes past your doorway. her face pale and drawn. You follow, your robe half on, slippers barely tied, until you reach the courtyard. There, gathered in a tight circle, the other Vestals whisper and clutch their hands together in that very Roman way that says, "We're keeping it together, but only just." One of the elder priestesses turns to you, and her voice is heavy. "The flame," she says. "It's out." You freeze. There's nothing more to say. The sacred flame of Vesta, the one thing you're all sworn to protect, has gone dark, snuffed out, failed. It's not just a practical crisis. It's not even just a religious one. It's a national catastrophe. In the minds of the people, this means the goddess has turned her face away from Rome, that the pact between gods and state has broken. Something is wrong with the world. Now, technically speaking, there are emergency rituals for this kind of thing. Sacred fire can be reignited using pure methods, most commonly the friction of two blessed pieces of wood, not flint, not torches. It has to be born again, cleanly, as if from the earth and sky themselves. But that takes time, and while the elders prepare the rites, the rest of you wait, whisper, wonder. Whose fault is this? You're already calculating you weren't on duty last night. You double-check the wood, the windshields, the incense, but logic doesn't always matter when Rome's collective paranoia kicks in. People want someone to blame, and usually it's the youngest or the weakest. Sometimes both. You shuffle back to your quarters, head low. You've seen this before. Well, you've heard the stories. A flame goes out and suddenly a Vestal is being questioned in front of the Pontifex Maximus. If it's deemed negligence, there might be a flogging, public, ceremonial, humiliating. Not the kind that draws blood, just the kind that breaks your spirit. The worst part? They usually bring in a litter, and the girl is whipped while veiled, so as not to pollute anyone by seeing her pain. That's mercy, apparently. But if the extinguished flame is interpreted as a sign of deeper impurity, a sign that someone has broken their vow of chastity, then the punishment turns darker, much darker. Let's pause for a second and talk about that particular horror. If a Vestal is suspected of violating her vow of virginity, usually with a senator, a knight, or someone with political ambitions, the trial is almost always conducted in secret. You don't get to defend yourself, you don't get a lawyer, you get silence, veiled whispers, and a sentence carved into religious theatre. Because remember, no one is allowed to kill a Vestal. That would be an offence against the gods. So Rome, clever as ever, found a loophole. They built a small underground room just outside the Colleen Gate. Inside, a couch, a loaf of bread, a lamp, and a pitcher of water. They dressed the accused in her funeral clothes and led her in a slow, mournful procession as the crowd watched in sacred discomfort. No one said her name aloud. No one cried out. They lowered her into the dark chamber, sealed the entrance with dirt and stone, and walked away. "We didn't kill her," Rome said, wiping its hands. "We merely offered her to the gods." The last recorded burial like this happened in 394 CE, but before that, it was disturbingly common. Whole generations of Vestals lived in fear of a crime they didn't have to commit to be punished for. Gossip alone could bury you alive. And yes, in case you're wondering, there were men involved too. The accused partner, assuming there was one, usually met a quicker end. Beaten to death with rods, tossed into the Tiber, but no one built a symbolic death chamber for him. Just for you. Back in the present, the fire has been rekindled. The elder priestess announces it at dinner in a voice so calm you almost forget the dread that's been sitting in your stomach like a stone. No one was punished today. No one confessed. Maybe the wind blew the coals apart. Maybe someone forgot to feed it at the right hour. Or maybe, and this is the most terrifying thought of all, maybe the goddess really is angry. Because not every failure has a human cause. That night, as you lie awake in your narrow bed, you stare at the dark ceiling and wonder how long you'll be able to keep doing this. You're barely halfway through your 30 years. You've learned the chants, memorized the prayers, practiced the sacred hand gestures, but nothing prepares you for the daily terror of being perfect, of having to be perfect. You live in a world where the smallest misstep can doom you, not just in the eyes of your peers, but in the eyes of the gods. And here's the scholarly debate that's still going. Were these punishments, especially the burials, really about religious purity, or were they political tools? It's suspicious, historians argue, How often a Vestal scandal aligns perfectly with a political power shift? One powerful man falls from grace, and suddenly the Vestal he was close to is under trial. Coincidence? Or is Rome, once again, using religion as a stage for deeper games? The truth, of course, is probably both. In Rome, politics and religion are twin snakes, tangled so tightly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. And you're the beating heart in the middle, sacred, untouchable, and totally expendable. But for now, the flame burns again. You close your eyes and let the silence wrap around you like a second robe. You didn't fail today. You didn't die. You're still here. And that, in this life, is no small thing. The next morning, Rome is loud. Louder than usual. Not just the clatter of carts or the grumble of vendors yelling over one another. This is event loud. That particular thrum of collective anticipation humming through every alley, echoing off marble columns. Something big is happening today, and for once you're not watching from a shadowed temple corridor. You're going to the Colosseum. You step into your carriage, the sacred one reserved only for the Vestals. It's white, polished, pulled by horses that probably get better food than most citizens. You sit straight, veiled and silent, as the vehicle rolls past crowded streets where people wave, cross themselves, or look away nervously. One boy drops to his knees and mutters a prayer. Another throws flower petals under your wheels. It's a weird feeling being worshipped on your way to a blood sport. The Colosseum itself looms ahead, huge and sun-blasted, like the gods took a bite out of the earth and left a stadium behind. You've seen it before from a distance, but today you'll have a seat of honour. The best seat, actually. Vestals get prime viewing. Not in the Emperor's box, but close enough to hear his wine slosh when he laughs. Your presence here isn't about entertainment. It's about approval. The games are sacred in their own brutal way, and your calm white robes give Rome permission to enjoy them guilt-free. You're ushered to your seat by guards who bow low but don't speak. You take your place among the cushions and look out at the massive arena below. The crowd roars as a pair of gladiators enter, one gleaming in bronze armour, the other wrapped in net and trident. Their bodies are scarred like old scrolls, each mark a line in a life lived too hard and too short. You don't flinch when the fight begins, though your heart tugs when one goes down hard and the other looks up for a verdict. The crowd shouts, thumbs turn, and then they turn to you. You blink. It's subtle, but in that moment you realise they're waiting on your expression. One twist of your lips, one raise of your brow, and the condemned man might walk away, or die right there in the dust. You're not the Emperor, but your purity makes your opinion matter. You're like a living lie detector crossed with a moral compass. If you seem unsettled, people question the justice of the kill. If you look calm, they celebrate it. No pressure, you give nothing, no nod, no flicker, and in the stillness the decision is made, by someone else, thankfully. The crowd erupts again, and the victor raises his blood-slick hands in triumph. You sit back, very still, very serene, while chaos reigns below. That's the strangest thing about your life. On the surface, you do nothing. You don't fight, you don't speak publicly, you don't create laws or lead armies. But your presence is like gravity. Everything moves around you, adjusting, reacting. You hold power not through action, but through existence. After the games, there's a banquet. You don't eat at the feast, but you attend, seated at the high tables among Rome's elite. Senators nod to you. Generals murmur blessings as they pass. Even the Emperor, if he's there, acknowledges you with a slight tilt of the head, a gesture he gives to almost no one else. You don't speak. You don't toast. You just sit there in white linen and veiled silence, radiating sacred approval like a human incense burner. You do, however, get to drink wine. That's a little-known perk. Most Roman women aren't allowed to touch the stuff, but Vestals, you get your own chalice, filled with carefully selected vintage, sometimes even mixed with honey or herbs. It's not enough to make you drunk. Well, usually. But it's one of the few things that remind you you're not just a statue. Weird sidebar. Occasionally you're called to make decisions in legal cases. That's right. You. The silent, veiled figure in the background might be asked to weigh in on inheritance disputes, religious violations, or even marital drama. If someone needs an incorruptible witness, the Vestals are it. Your word carries the weight of an oath, and breaking that kind of truth isn't just illegal, it's sacrilegious. And here's the part that makes the scholars squint and argue. Some think this legal authority made you the closest thing to a female, magistrate in ancient Rome. Not officially, of course. Rome would never go that far. But in practice, your approval could settle feuds, free prisoners, or doom an ambitious senator's latest marriage plan. You were neutral, or at least that's what everyone liked to pretend. After the banquet, you ride back in the carriage, feet sore, stomach tight from too much sitting and not enough moving. The sun has dipped low, casting golden stripes across the domes and columns of the forum. It's beautiful in a way you never get tired of, even when it feels like a painting you're trapped inside. Back at the house of the Vestals, you unpin your veil with care. Each movement is practiced, measured. You can't just rip it off like a frustrated teen in a sweaty uniform. No, you remove your holiness layer by layer, as if undoing the day itself. You hang your robes on hooks carved centuries ago, wash your hands in chilled rosewater, and breathe in the faint smell of oil lamps and laurel. You lie in bed that night thinking not of the arena, but of the eyes. Thousands of eyes watching you, measuring your silence, your posture, your invisible influence. And you wonder, what happens when the eyes turn away? When your 30 years are up? When the flame is no longer yours to tend, and the veil is no longer yours to wear? You've heard rumours of former Vestals. Some marry, though many men are afraid of you, even after you've retired. Others live alone, funded by generous pensions, treated like living relics. Respected, yes, but also slightly feared. You don't stop being sacred just because your shift ends. That kind of divine touch tends to linger. Another strange historical wrinkle. There are stories, just whispers, that some Vestals didn't want to leave. After 30 years, the outside world felt chaotic, unsafe, unprotected. In here, at least, you know the rules, you know what's expected. Out there, you're just a woman again. And for some, that's not freedom. That's exile. You roll over, clutching your blanket, staring at the stone ceiling. The day was long. Your back aches. But you were seen. You were respected. And for a few golden hours, you reminded Rome what perfection looked like in linen. You hear the whisper before you see the look. It's subtle. Just a flicker of breath exchanged between two elder Vestals as you pass them in the colonnade. Not a full conversation. Just a glance. The sort you learn to read when your life depends on silences. You keep walking, arms full of ritual implements, a dish of salt, a bundle of sacred straw, a bronze bowl for ashes, the tools of the trade. But your mind is racing. You've seen this before. It always starts the same way. Glances, whispers, extra surveillance during rituals, a question asked twice when once would have done. The undercurrent is unmistakable. Someone is being watched. Someone has stepped too close to the line. And the line, in this case, is a vow that looms over your entire existence like the moon over a quiet graveyard. The vow of chastity. You took it when you entered the order, your small voice barely audible in the temple as you promised, in front of the gods, the Senate, and the people of Rome, to remain untouched. Not just sexually pure, but untouched in spirit, in thought, in closeness. No secrets, no flirtation, no private letters, no lingering looks, no anything that could be twisted into doubt. For 30 years, your body belongs to Vesta, and Rome will make sure you feel that. The problem is people are still human, even in white robes. You've heard stories, of course, of girls, women, who thought they could bend the rules. There was Amelia, a name spoken with a half-gasp even now, who was caught sneaking out at dusk to meet a poet near the Circus Maximus. He wrote her verses. She wrote him her doom. No one really knows if they were lovers, or if the story was invented by a political enemy. It didn't matter. She was tried in secret, sentenced, buried, alive. The process is clinical, almost disturbingly so. Once accused, the Vestal is stripped of her veil and led through the forum in silence, accompanied by the Pontifex Maximus and a handful of guards. No chains, no violence, just ritual. At the edge of the city, where the sacred and the profane blur, a small chamber waits, dug into the earth like a broken promise. She's given bread, water, milk and oil, not as mercy, but to show Rome didn't directly take her life. Then the door is sealed, and that's it. This horror exists to protect an idea, that the flame of Vesta, and by extension the heart of Rome, is pure, that nothing taints it, nothing touches it. So if one of you does, if someone lets the boundary dissolve, the entire illusion is threatened. That's why the punishment is so disproportionate. It's not about what you did, it's about what it says about Rome that you might have done it. And the thing is, you don't even need proof. The mere suspicion of impurity can lead to interrogation. A Vestal who gets too close to a man, any man, becomes liability. Even the appearance of closeness is enough. We once saw a senior Vestal reprimand a younger one for speaking to a senator's son too long after a public ceremony. Her tone was gentle but final. "He will forget that moment by nightfall," she said, "but you will carry it with you for the next 20 years, or into the ground." The irony? You're surrounded by men. Pontiffs, guards, temple workers, visiting dignitaries. You can't avoid them, but you must never become familiar. You must glide past them like a shadow, like a concept, not a person. And sometimes that's exactly what you feel like, a concept, hollowed out for sacred use. Here's a bizarre detail most people forget. The crime of breaking the vow of chastity wasn't technically called adultery. It was considered incestum, not because you were related to anyone, but because your body was dedicated to a goddess. So any defilement was seen as sacrilege, like someone defiling a temple altar. You weren't a woman anymore. You were property of the divine. The term is debated among scholars, of course. Some argue that incestum had more to do with general impurity than actual sexual misconduct. Others insist that the ritual language encoded a deeper belief, that to touch a Vestal was to offend not just a rule, but the cosmic order. Either way, the result was the same. Someone ends up in the dirt. You've had your own moments of danger, little cracks in the stone. Once, a guard brushed your arm while helping you out of a carriage. Innocent, accidental, but you felt the heat rise up your neck like wildfire. Not because of him, because of the eyes. People notice, people talk, and once the fire of rumour starts, it burns even brighter than Vesta's flame. It gets stranger when the man in question is powerful. There were times when emperors took a, let's say, special interest in the Vestals. Some gave them lavish gifts, arranged elaborate banquets in their honour, even proposed marriage after their service was over. Others, like Elagabalus, who was rumoured to have married a Vestal in direct violation of every religious law on the books, treated the taboo like a personal challenge. That marriage, by the way, didn't end well. Neither did his reign. Tonight you sleep light. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because the atmosphere in the house of the Vestals has changed. It's tighter, quieter, too quiet. One of the others is missing from evening prayers. You glance at the remaining faces and count 5 instead of 6. No one mentions her name. No one asks where she is. You don't have to. The next day she returns. Pale, red-eyed, hair slightly askew. Her veil is missing, and her posture, normally erect, trained to a spine-snapping degree, is soft, wilted. She doesn't speak, just takes her seat and keeps her gaze fixed on the floor. Whatever was whispered yesterday has moved one step closer to certainty. And you say nothing. Because in this place, survival is sacred too. You're standing in the forum, sun slicing through the late morning haze, when a man is dragged past you in chains. He's not a criminal, not yet. His tunic is clean, his sandals still tied, but his face is a wreck. Sweat, panic, disbelief. He's shouting something, probably pleading his case, though the guards hauling him forward don't flinch. You don't know who he is. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Because in this moment, you might be his only chance at surviving. This is one of the strangest powers you hold, the right of intercession. You, in your quiet robes and practiced stillness, can halt an execution just by being there. If a person condemned to death sees a Vestal, if they physically cross your path on the way to the executioner, and you acknowledge it, they must be spared. Not out of pity, not out of politics. Because it's a sign from the gods. You don't look away. You don't blink. The man collapses at your feet, grovelling. Not dramatically, this isn't theatre. but with a desperate, wordless gratitude. You can feel the eyes of the crowd boring into your veil, waiting to see what you'll do. Your breath catches in your chest. Then you nod, just slightly, barely perceptible beneath the folds of sacred linen. But that's all it takes. The guards stop. One barks a curse, the other lowers his whip. The man is hauled to his feet and taken away, not to die, but to wait. Maybe for trial, maybe for exile. He's still a problem, but not your problem anymore, and everyone knows that for today at least the gods have intervened. You don't do it often. It's not something you want to do. Every time you use that power, someone questions your motives. Were you moved by pity? Was he your cousin's servant? Did he bribe one of the temple workers? The scrutiny is suffocating. So you save it for the moments when you feel it deep in your chest, that quiet tug that says, if I don't stop this, no one will. The irony is, you have the power to save a life, but not to speak at a trial. You can't vote in the Senate. You can't make laws. You can't even make a public speech, but you can unmake a death sentence with a single nod. Rome is full of paradoxes like that, and being a Vestal means living in all of them at once. There's another version of this, more ceremonial but just as strange. Once a year, during the festival of Vestalia, the public is allowed inside the temple, a rare event. It's the one time the inner sanctum opens, and people come barefoot carrying offerings, weeping, praying, begging for forgiveness or luck. You walk among them, untouched but not unnoticed. People thrust babies at you, hoping a glance will bring protection. Old women grasp your hem until they're pulled away. Farmers offer cakes and chickens. Merchants promise donations. Everyone wants something. You give them what you can, presents, silence, a flick of your hand over their heads, the symbolic gesture of blessing. It doesn't matter if they believe in the literal power of your touch. What matters is that you're there, and because you are, the world feels a little more stable. It's the same logic behind the rule that says you must never swear falsely. Ever. Not even a little white lie. If a Vestal is caught lying under oath, it's more than a legal problem. It's a rupture in the spiritual order. The punishment isn't just public shame or loss of credibility. It's a formal ritual of expulsion. You get deconsecrated, scrubbed from the order, and sometimes even exiled. You go from being sacred to being dangerous, as if your body might poison the city just by breathing in it. Historians still argue about how often these powers were actually used. Some believe the stories of miraculous pardons were exaggerated over time to enhance the mystique. Others think the Vestals were more active behind the scenes than records let on, quietly shaping policy through soft influence. After all, when people think you speak with the voice of the gods, they tend to listen, even if you never say a word. And while we're on the subject of things you can't say, marriage, that's a fun one. If you're thinking 30 years of chastity earns you some romance at the end of it, Rome has thoughts. Yes, you're technically allowed to marry after retirement, but good luck finding a man brave enough to touch what the gods once claimed. Most Romans believe ex-Vestals are still bound by divine aura, still too pure or too untouchable to make suitable wives. The ones who do marry often find their husbands treating them like relics, admired, dusted off, and kept at arm's length. Still, there were a few bold men, usually widowers or aging senators, hoping the divine residue might rub off. Some believed marrying a former Vestal brought good fortune. Others just wanted the status, and maybe one or two were truly in love. Maybe. One curious little story that's lasted through the ages is of a retired Vestal who married a man she'd known before her service began. He waited 30 years, never married anyone else, and sent a letter every year, even though she couldn't read them until her vows ended. When she finally retired, they wed in a quiet ceremony far from Rome. There's no record of what happened to them after, but we like to imagine it was good. Of course, most of you never get there. The 30 years take their toll. Many don't make it to retirement, whether due to illness, suspicion, or accidents. And even if you do, the adjustment is brutal. After decades of being treated like a goddess, it's hard to go back to being a person. There are no temples built for your post-service life, no rituals for easing back into society, just quiet and questions, and sometimes loneliness. But today, You walk back through the forum with the sun warm on your shoulders and a quiet satisfaction tucked inside your ribs. You didn't mean to save a life this morning, it wasn't planned, but it happened. And not because you argued or pleaded or wielded a sword. You existed. You walked by. You were seen. And in Rome, sometimes that's enough to change everything. Sometimes when the day is quiet and the house still, you slip away from your assigned tasks and walk the stone path to the Temple of Vesta. Not for duty, but for curiosity. You've spent years performing ceremonies here, feeding the sacred flame, chanting the same words over and over, but there's one part of the temple that always catches your eye. The underground vault, hidden beneath the altar, locked away and forbidden. It's rarely spoken of, even among the elder Vestals, but everyone knows it's there, and everyone wonders what's inside. They call it the Penis Vesti, which, yes, sounds like a joke to modern ears, but in Rome, it means the innermost chamber of Vesta, sacred space squared. It's where the holiest relics are kept, and no one, not even the highest-ranking priests, is allowed inside except for the Vestals themselves. It's the one place in the empire where only women can go. You've never seen the vault opened. It's sealed with bronze locks and covered with a curtain woven with symbols older than Rome itself. Sometimes, during certain rituals, the eldest Vestal disappears behind the curtain alone and doesn't return for hours. No one speaks while she's gone. No one asks what she does in there. When she emerges, her face is unreadable. Calm. Distant. Like someone who's just touched something too large to explain. Rumours swirl around the chamber. Officially, it holds the Palladium, a small wooden statue of Athena, or maybe Minerva, depending on who you ask, that Aeneas supposedly brought from Troy. The story goes that as long as the Palladium remains in Rome, the city cannot fall. Some versions say it's just a copy, that the real one is hidden even deeper underground, in another temple, guarded by soldiers who never sleep. Others claim it's not a statue at all, but a glowing stone, or a bundle of sacred scrolls, or a literal spark of divine fire caught in a glass vessel. And then there are the really fringe theories. You hear whispers, usually from temple servants or drunken visitors during festivals, about strange objects brought from foreign lands, tucked away to avoid public panic. One story insists there's an egg inside, a massive egg, supposedly laid by a celestial swan, gifted by the goddess Leda herself. Another says there's a golden book that writes itself, ink appearing across its pages in languages no one speaks. You laugh when you hear that one, but later, in the silence of your room, you find yourself imagining what it would be like to read something only the gods understand. Of course, you're not supposed to wonder. That's the tricky part. You're trained to perform the rituals without questioning them. The flame burns, the offerings are made, the prayers are said, and that's it. But the older you get, the harder it is to ignore the inconsistencies, the gaps in logic. Why do some of the chants reference animals that don't live in Italy? Why are there rituals that no one seems to understand anymore but are still performed exactly the same way every year? Once, during a quiet moment with the oldest Vestal, a woman who served for longer than you've been alive, you dared to ask what she saw in the vault, just a whisper of a question. Her response, a thin smile and a single word, continuity, whatever that means. And that's the thing. So much of your role is built on not knowing. You're a vessel of tradition, not of understanding. But sometimes, especially in the quiet hours when the temple is empty and the fire flickers low, you wonder if that's enough. Are you preserving something real, or just protecting a very old illusion? There's scholarly debate about this too, modern thinkers arguing over whether the Penis Vesti ever held anything at all. Some say it was symbolic, a stage prop to give the rituals weight. Others insist the relics were real, but their meanings lost over time, buried under centuries of ceremonial repetition. A few go further, suggesting the whole cult of Vesta was a tool of early Roman statecraft, built not to honour a goddess, but to bind the people together with shared mystery and sacred obligation. Honestly, you're not sure they're wrong. Still, mystery or not, the vault is protected with the same care as the Emperor's treasury. The penalty for unauthorised entry isn't just expulsion, it's death, and not a quiet one. The people would riot if they thought the city's divine protection had been violated. Your body would be displayed as a warning, your name scrubbed from the rolls. The veil of sacred silence doesn't extend to betrayal. And yet, you're tempted. You've walked past that curtain so many times your fingers twitch when you pass it. You imagine stepping through, just once, lifting the lock, peering inside. Not to steal, not to harm, just to know. But you don't. Because in this life, knowledge is not your currency. Silence is. Still, tonight, you lie in bed and picture it anyway. The secret chamber beneath the temple, cool and dark, filled with the whispers of history. Maybe there is a statue. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe just the silence of centuries pressed into stone. Either way, it's real to Rome. And for now, that's what matters. You're up before dawn again, summoned not by alarm or command, but by the smell. It's earthy, warm, slightly sweet, something between toasted grain and wood smoke, and it means only one thing. Today is Sacrificial Cake Day, which, despite sounding like a bakery promotion, is actually one of your sacred chores as a Vestal. The cakes, called mola salsa, are a key ingredient in Roman religious life. Every animal sacrificed to the gods, every offering laid on an altar, every festival of significance, starts with these simple salted flour cakes, and only you are allowed to make them. Yes, really. One of your most mystical duties as a living divine symbol involves baking. You shuffle into the preparation room, a smooth little space tucked behind the temple, where large bronze bowls wait patiently and the millstones sit like ancient sleeping beasts. Everything here is ritualized. The flour is from a specific kind of wheat, ground only on holy days. The salt must be sun-dried and crushed by hand. The water, pulled from a spring just outside the city, poured by a temple servant who hasn't spoken a word since his appointment, which, honestly, might just be a personality quirk, but it adds to the mystery. You wash your hands in cold rose-scented water, not for hygiene, well, not just for hygiene, but because every part of this process is bound up in purity, physical and symbolic. The ingredients are nothing unless they're handled correctly. You measure out the flour with a carved wooden spoon that's older than the Republic. You add the salt with your fingers, tracing a spiral pattern before mixing. You knead the dough slowly, rhythmically, whispering a chant that's as old as the myths about Aeneas. You wonder, as you always do, whether the gods actually care about the cakes. If Vesta sits in some ethereal dining hall, nibbling on salted biscuits while lightning bolts clatter in the background, or if it's just the act of making them, of following the recipe to the letter, of honouring the repetition, that matters. And yes, scholars have argued about this too. Some believe mola salsa began as a simple offering, humble food from humble hands, and was later dressed up in sacred meaning as the rituals got more complex. Others think the cakes were always symbolic, tied to ancient agricultural rites, representing the bond between grain and fire, life and sacrifice. One theory even suggests they were once used not just in ceremonies, but on sacrificial animals, literally sprinkled over the creature before it was killed, to bless it, purify it, or maybe just season it. Rome, home of both holiness and efficiency. Once the dough is ready, you roll it into little discs. Not perfect circles. Perfection is for marble statues, not food, but close enough to satisfy the watching eyes of your elders. The cakes are baked over a small sacred fire fed by laurel branches. They smoke, crackle, and puff, filling the room with a comforting, almost maternal smell. It reminds you of home, not your divine home in the temple, but your actual childhood home, where your mother used to make flatbread on festival days. Before all this. When the cakes are done, you place them carefully into baskets lined with white cloth. They'll be used throughout the month for various rites. Some will be offered to household gods, others burned at public altars. A few will be reserved for the next animal sacrifice, which is not your favourite part of the job, but you've learned not to flinch when the blood flows. Because yes, despite all the veils and ceremonies, Rome's religious life is rooted in blood. It's not violent for the sake of violence. Well, mostly it's about balance. Life must be exchanged to preserve life. Offerings must be made to keep chaos at bay. And sometimes that means a lamb. Sometimes it means a bull. Sometimes it means you standing beside the altar, eyes steady as the knife comes down and the blood splashes onto the sacred stone. The cakes are there for that too. You crumble them into the blood, stir them with wine, pour them into the fire. They transform death into sacrifice. You, somehow, are the link between the two. It's easy to forget in the daily routines, the braiding, the sweeping, the fire tending, that you live in a world powered by symbolism. Everything you do is loaded with layers of meaning. Even your silence is interpreted as wisdom. Even your footsteps across the temple floor are said to echo in the ears of the gods. But the cakes are different. The cakes are real. You feel the flour on your hands, the dough under your fingers. You breathe the heat, taste the salt, burn your wrist on the iron pan if you're not careful. And in those moments, it's the most grounded you ever feel. Sometimes you wonder if the people who see you in public, the ones who bow, whisper, avert their eyes, know that you spend your mornings baking. Do they imagine you floating on clouds, issuing divine pronouncements from marble thrones? Would they laugh, or would they kneel even harder if they saw the flour smudged on your robe? After the baking is done, you return to the main temple carrying the basket with both hands. One of the elder Vestals meets you at the altar. She takes a cake, breaks it in half, and places the pieces on the edge of the sacred flame. They sizzle and curl at the edges, then vanish in a puff of smoke and ash. Nothing else is said. But in that quiet, smoky moment, you feel it. Connection. To the gods. To the past. To all the women who stood in this exact spot millennia before you, covered in flour, whispering the same words into the fire. It doesn't matter whether the gods are real in the way statues are real. What matters is that you believe, or that someone believes, and that belief keeps the world spinning. Later that evening you find a stray cake in your sleeve, crumbled but still warm. You're not supposed to eat them, they're sacred. But you stare at it for a long time, tempted. You don't, but you think about it. Because sometimes holiness tastes like salt and ash. It starts with a crow, just one, perched on the outer rim of the Temple of Vesta, cawing like it owns the world. Nothing unusual, right? Birds land on roofs, they scream, they move on. But then a second one joins, then a third, and they don't move on. They just sit there, feathers ruffled, staring down at you with shiny, black, judgmental eyes. A bad omen, someone mutters. You try to laugh, but your stomach doesn't get the joke. You've seen this kind of tension before. Rome runs on signs, divine nods and cosmic nudges. Every gust of wind, every twisted branch, every animal behaving weirdly is suspect. The crows could mean anything. War, death, corruption in the Senate. Or maybe someone forgot to feed the temple cat again. But in your world, signs are never just signs. They become blame. And when things go wrong in Rome, guess who's always in the line of fire? You. Not you personally, though that risk is always lurking, but you as a Vestal. The city expects peace, prosperity, and perfectly choreographed rituals. If the crops fail, if there's an earthquake, if lightning hits a statue, someone's going to start side-eyeing the priestesses in white. Because if you're not pure, if your flame flickers, if your rites are even slightly off, Rome thinks the gods will punish everyone. So when the crows won't leave, and the augurs, Rome's official birdwatchers basically, declare the behaviour unnatural, a storm of anxiety whips through the forum. And then it happens. A senator collapses during a speech, just drops mid-rant like a puppet cut from its strings, dead before he hits the floor. People scream. One woman faints. Another starts praying aloud like it's an exorcism. The message spreads like wildfire. The gods are angry. You're summoned before the College of Pontiffs that afternoon. It's not a formal accusation, yet, more like an audit. They want to know, has the flame wavered? Has the ritual bread been prepared incorrectly? Have the temple sacrifices gone unburned? And, here's the one that lands like a rock in your chest. Has any Vestal been acting suspiciously? You keep your voice calm. You list every ritual, every duty, every schedule. You say that the flame has not gone out, the cakes were made with sacred flour, and no one has disrespected the rites. And technically, you're telling the truth, but technically isn't always enough. The Pontifex Maximus narrows his eyes, tapping a wax tablet with one crooked finger. You wonder if he already suspects someone. If this isn't about the crows or the senator at all, but about power. Vestals are too pure, too untouchable. A useful scapegoat, sure, but also a threat if they start asking questions, or, worse, earning loyalty from the wrong people. You've read the mood in the forum lately. The city's tense. Grain shipments are late. The army lost a skirmish in the north. The emperor has a cough he won't admit is getting worse. In times like these, people don't look inward. They look for someone sacred to punish. It doesn't matter if it's fair. It just needs to look like divine balance has been restored. One of the elder Vestals, Lucilla, pulls you aside afterward. Her voice is a whisper but sharp as a blade. Keep your eyes down, your mouth shut. Do your rights perfectly. We are not safe right now. Not safe. That phrase hits harder than it should. Because technically you've never been safe. Not since the day you were chosen. But there are moments when the temple feels like a sanctuary. Today isn't one of them. That night, you walk the temple perimeter before bed. Not because it's required, but because you need to move, to breathe, to think. The marble tiles are cool under your feet. The sacred fire is still burning, strong and bright. The crows are gone, but their absence feels just as loud as their cawing. You find yourself staring up at the statue of Vesta in the outer chamber. She's small compared to other gods. No towering spears or thrones. Just a modest figure holding a flame, her face serene and unreadable. You wonder if she's listening, or if she ever was. Maybe she's just a shape Rome poured its fears into. A convenient vessel for centuries of ritualized control. Here's a quirky little historical detail. In rare cases, when a Vestal was accused and found innocent, Rome threw a massive public celebration, like parade levels of celebration, flowers, feasting, praises sung from balconies. The people rejoiced because the gods had spared them. But make no mistake, it wasn't for your sake, it was for theirs. The city needed to feel clean again, which means that when something bad happens, even if it has nothing to do with you, the safest thing Rome can do is point fingers at its most sacred parts, then try to scrub them clean. So, when a lightning bolt strikes a small statue in the Temple of Mars 2 days later, you already know what's coming. The priestesses whisper behind veils, the pontiffs meet in secret, and you start noticing subtle things. Your food being tasted before it's served, your footsteps shadowed by temple guards, your prayers monitored by eyes you can't see but can definitely feel. The younger Vestals are scared. One of them cries silently into her veil during morning rites. You don't blame her. She's only 12, and Rome might already be sharpening the shovel. The thing that keeps you going is the fire. It's still there, still steady. You tend it more often now, lingering longer than necessary, hands warming over the flame. You talk to it sometimes, not with words, but in the quiet language of breath and presence. It's the only part of your world that doesn't lie. Fire consumes. Fire transforms. Fire doesn't care about politics or omens. It just burns. And so do you, in your own way. You sleep that night with one ear open, waiting for the sound of footsteps, for the quiet knock that means someone has been chosen to take the fall. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Because in Rome, the gods are always watching, but the people, they're always blaming. There's a curious kind of power in being untouchable, not the metaphorical kind, although there's plenty of that too, but the literal kind, the don't even brush against her sleeve or you'll be struck down by divine wrath kind. You walk through the streets of Rome with a bubble of space around you, like the city itself is holding its breath. Market crowds part before you. Soldiers back away. Even beggars hesitate to raise their hands. You're not just respected. You're radioactive. This morning you pass a group of slaves hauling marble, and one of them drops the statue foot he's carrying when he sees your veil. He falls to his knees so fast it's like someone pulled his strings. You keep walking, offering no reaction. If you acknowledged every act of reverence, you'd never get anywhere. But part of you feels it, like a vibration running up through the stone street. It's not admiration, it's fear. And Rome loves fear, as long as it's wearing a smile. You've seen the way even the emperor softens around you, not because he likes you, not personally, but because your presence legitimizes him. When he invites you to a banquet or nods to you during a parade, it sends a message to the people. Look, even the Vestals respect me. I must be favoured by the gods. Your presence becomes his divine stamp of approval. It's a strange dance. He flatters you with gifts, invites you to sit near him at public games, pretends to seek your wisdom, and in return you pretend not to notice when he uses your name in speeches. as if you personally blessed his grain reform or military campaign. This has been going on for centuries. In the early days of the empire, emperors showered the Vestals with attention. Augustus in particular was obsessed with using old religion to prop up new power. He rebranded the Vestals as symbols of Rome's eternal values, purity, duty, loyalty, and plastered their image all over public monuments. Statues, coins, poetry. It worked. The people bought it. He kept you close, and suddenly his whole regime felt a little holier. But the truth behind the veil is more complicated. You see, being untouchable doesn't just mean sacred, it means isolated. You're too pure for most men to marry, too terrifying for strangers to approach. Even inside the house of the Vestals, there's a distance that never fully closes. You live in close quarters, but privacy is rare and trust is conditional. Everyone knows that being accused of impurity, or worse, heresy, can destroy you. So conversations stay surface level. Friendships have boundaries. Secrets are risky. That's why, when a new emperor ascends and sends gifts to the temple, golden bowls, ivory combs, imported perfumes, you accept them with calm dignity, knowing full well that they aren't really for you. They're for Vesta, and you're just the delivery system. A beautiful, silent, breathing PR campaign. One time, when you were about 17, an emperor, young, charming, too proud for his own good, joked during a feast that he might make you his empress. Everyone laughed. Too loud, too long, including you. Because what else could you do? You couldn't say, "That's illegal," or "I'm not allowed," or "You're disgusting." You just smiled beneath your veil, lifted your goblet of sacred wine and toasted to the gods. And that was enough. The moment passed, the joke faded, but for days afterward you noticed extra guards around the temple, more eyes. The way your meals were tasted first, your footsteps shadowed. Because if the emperor ever did make such a move, the scandal wouldn't just scorch him. It would incinerate the entire priesthood. The flame might go out. Rome might fall. You don't belong to yourself, you belong to an idea. And ideas are dangerous to men in power. There's an open scholarly debate about how much real influence the Vestals had. Some historians think you were just decorative, holy window dressing for a deeply patriarchal society. Others argue that you held subtle, behind-the-scenes power. You had access to high-ranking officials. You could affect public opinion just by being present or absent. And more than once, Vestals intervened in trials, political disputes, even successions. One famous case involves a Vestal named Claudia. Her father was accused of treason, an accusation that usually led straight to a sword in the gut. But Claudia walked straight into the Senate, stood silently before the men who ruled Rome, and refused to leave. She didn't plead, she didn't argue, she just stood. And they backed down. Her father was acquitted. The records are fuzzy. Some say it never happened. Others say it was propaganda. But the point is, the story lasted. It worked. Rome remembered. You think about Claudia sometimes when you walk the forum alone, when men avert their eyes, when priests bow and children whisper, and even the temple cats seem to respect your space. You wonder what kind of courage it takes to risk your entire life on one quiet act of resistance, and whether you'll ever have to. Because despite all the gifts and banquets and flattery, you've seen how quickly that affection curdles. All it takes is one bad harvest, one military defeat, one whisper in the wrong corridor, and suddenly the emperor isn't smiling anymore. Suddenly the Senate is calling for investigations. Suddenly the people want blood, divine blood if possible. They don't care if you've done anything wrong. They care that the gods are angry. So you walk the line every day, sacred but expendable, celebrated but suspicious. You nod in all the right places, hold your veil just so, keep your thoughts folded like parchment inside your skull. But sometimes, when the streets are quiet and no one's watching, you dare to imagine a world where your power isn't borrowed or symbolic or tied to threats. A world where you could speak freely, act boldly, live as a woman instead of a shrine. Then you tuck that thought away like a prayer and keep walking. It happens quietly, as these things often do. No bells, no shouts, no drama, just a soft rustling in the dead of night. You wake to the sound of movement in the hallway, the shuffle of leather sandals on marble. It's not a regular patrol. It's slower, heavier. When you slip from your bed and press your ear to the door, there's only silence. that kind that's too still to be natural. You don't need to be told what it means. Someone's been condemned, and this time, it's one of you. You lie back down, eyes wide open, veil still on from the evening rites, and stare at the ceiling. Not praying, not blinking, just waiting. You've always known this was a possibility, of course. Every Vestal does. It's the shadow you're taught to ignore, the consequence that looms in every vow, every ritual. You don't even know who it is yet who crossed the invisible shifting line, but you feel the absence like a loose stone in your chest. In the morning, the name is not spoken. It never is. Her room is sealed, her belongings removed. It's as if she was never there. The other girls glance around the courtyard but say nothing. The elder Vestals are particularly grim, faces hard, voices thin. A temple servant tries to scrub something from the marble threshold of the missing girl's room, though you're not sure what. Ashes, blood, dirt, guilt. Later, during the midday rites, a group of pontiffs enters. Not all of them, just a few, high-ranking, faces like weathered statues. And they gather in a tight knot near the altar, speaking too softly for you to hear. You continue your duties, lighting incense, placing cakes, whispering prayers, but every nerve in your body is listening. And then one of them turns, points, at you. Your heart seizes, just for a second. But the Pontifex Maximus steps past you without stopping, moving toward the sacred fire. You keep your eyes down. Your breath comes back. Barely. That evening you hear the sentence, burial. The word is never said aloud. It doesn't need to be. The phrase used is return to the earth. A public ceremony will be held, more for appearances than justice. They'll call it divine rebalancing, purification, the restoration of favour. Rome will nod and feast and move on. You will not. They've already begun preparing the site outside the Colin Gate. Not just a grave, a chamber, a room dug into the earth, carefully constructed so the accused Vestal will not technically be killed by human hands. No bloodshed, no direct violence, just a sealed door and a slow, silent end. It's Rome at its most theatrical, legally correct, morally horrific. And here's the kicker. No one knows if she's guilty. Some say she was seen whispering with a guard. Others claim letters were found in her room. There are rumours of a man, a senator's nephew, who fled the city the same night she disappeared. But no confessions were made, no trials held, just whispers and a decision. That's how it usually happens. The burden of proof is a formality. Your body is holy. Therefore, if something has gone wrong in the world, you must be the problem. It's a convenient equation for the powerful. The people don't question it either. They want reassurance, not complexity. A Vestal buried means Rome is cleansed. Justice is done. Order is restored. The morning of the burial, you're not allowed to leave the temple. You wouldn't want to anyway. But you hear the bells. They ring differently for this. Not joyful, not mournful, just steady. Like a heartbeat from underground. The procession is formal, quiet, watched by crowds who pretend to look away even as they lean forward. The condemned girl walks veiled and silent, flanked by guards, a small group of priests in white behind her. She's dressed in bridal robes, which is maybe the most twisted detail of all. The last thing she will wear is the symbol of a life she was never allowed to have. She carries a small bundle, bread, water, oil, a lamp. The mercies allowed by the law, not enough to survive, just enough to pretend that no one meant to kill her, and then she descends. No one watches that part. Not officially. The door is sealed behind her, the earth packed tight. A ritual chant is spoken, a sacrifice made. The crowd disperses. Rome breathes a little easier, but in the house of the Vestals the air never quite clears. You go through the motions for the next few days. You tend the fire. You knead the flour. You recite the same prayers you've always said, but everything is brittle now. The flame seems smaller. The halls echo more. You avoid the sealed room like it's cursed, which, in a way, it is. The younger girls are shaken. One cries herself to sleep. Another vomits during morning rites. You try to be the calm one, the voice of continuity, but you catch yourself flinching when someone speaks your name unexpectedly, or when the fire flickers just a little too low. You wonder what she thought, alone down there. If she sat on the couch, waiting. If she tried to keep the lamp lit. If she held on to the bread for as long as possible. If she prayed. If she cursed. If she screamed. You'll never know. No one ever does. You'd think with such a brutal tradition Rome would hesitate to carry it out. But no, they believe in it. The burial isn't just punishment, it's ritual theatre. It reassures the people that divine justice exists, that there are consequences, that Rome can still please its gods. Some historians argue the practice was less common than the records suggest. Maybe the stories were exaggerated, turned into cautionary tales. But someone built that chamber. Someone sealed it. And even if it only happened a few times, once is enough. After a week, a new novice is brought in to replace her. 6 again, balance restored. The girl is small, timid, eyes wide as saucers. You smile at her gently. Tell her it will be all right. You lie. Because if there's one thing you've learned, it's this. No one is ever truly safe here. Not even in the white robes. Especially not in the white robes. You're up late tonight, long after the usual rites are done, long after the temple has fallen into its usual hum of quiet and shadow. The fire's glow paints the curved walls gold, and your fingers are dusted with ash as you rake the coals gently, keeping the sacred flame alive. It's your turn on the overnight rotation, and you don't mind. You'd rather be here than lying in bed with your eyes wide open, listening for footsteps that never come. There's a strange calm in these hours. The city sleeps mostly. Rome is never truly quiet. Some poor soul is always arguing in the streets, or coughing through the night, or dragging a cart somewhere they probably shouldn't be. But the forum feels hushed, as if the stones themselves are resting. You, though, are wide awake. There's a clarity that comes when the sky's black and the air is still. It's when you think clearest. It's also when the fear creeps in, because tonight the fire almost went out. Not dramatically, not with a flash and a puff of smoke. It just dipped for a second. A flicker, a dimming. You caught it immediately, fed it more wood, adjusted the airflow, whispered a prayer that probably wasn't quite canon. But still, for that brief moment you saw it. The terrifying possibility. The sacred flame dying under your watch. And if it had, you know what would come next. There'd be a formal report, an inquest, pontiffs gathering with furrowed brows, theories, omens. Someone would claim they'd heard a bad dream the night before. A cow would sneeze, and people would take it as confirmation of divine wrath. And suddenly there's a list of questions being asked, not about the flame, but about you. Had you been distracted, ill, impure? Had you spoken with anyone you shouldn't? Had you been thinking impure thoughts? It doesn't take much. That's what frightens you most. Not the punishment, but the sheer randomness. You can do everything right and still find yourself buried in suspicion, because the fire is more than just fire. It's a barometer for Rome's faith and for your own perfection. If it falters, you're already guilty in the eyes of half the city. You sit back on your heels watching the flames breathe and dance. It's mesmerizing, honestly. You can see why people imagined gods in fire. It's alive, but not like an animal. It doesn't move toward food or away from pain. It just moves, constantly shifting, devouring, flickering in place. And somehow, you're responsible for its continued existence. The symbolism isn't subtle. The flame represents the life of Rome, the heart of the state, the soul of the people. If it dies, something inside the city dies with it. That's the belief. That's the weight you carry in your small ash-dusted hands. There's a story you remember hearing once from an older Vestal who's long since retired. A time during the Punic Wars when the flame went out on a stormy night. No one had noticed. The winds were howling, the temple windows rattling, the guards too busy tightening the shutters. By morning the fire was cold. The girl on duty was only 15. She wasn't punished, at least not officially. But within a year, she was gone. Retired early, they said. Reassigned, whispered others. Some say she was quietly executed, her name removed from the rolls. Others claim she left Rome entirely, fled to some tiny village and lived out her days as a ghost. The truth is no one really knows. But every time the fire flickers too low, that story returns, unspoken but heavy in the air. Stranger still is the idea that the fire can't go out. That's what some believe, that the goddess Vesta protects it herself, that the flame is eternal not just by effort, but by divine will. These are the same people who claim that if the fire ever did go out, and Rome didn't immediately collapse, it would mean the gods have left for good. Scholars debate this endlessly. Some think the stories of the flame going out were politically motivated, that they were convenient excuses to shuffle power, shame rivals, purge inconvenient priestesses. Others say the flame did fail multiple times throughout history, and that every time Rome performed elaborate rituals to pretend it never happened. As if reality could be rewritten with enough incense and ceremony. There are even fringe theories. Oh yes, the really spicy ones, that the flame you see every day isn't the original at all. That the real flame was extinguished centuries ago, and what you're tending now is a carefully constructed illusion. A lie fed with oil and politics. You don't know what to believe, but you do know this. The flame is still here. You're looking at it right now. It dances in front of you, casting flickering shadows on the polished stone. It burns, and because it burns, so does your purpose. If the fire dies, who are you? And what happens to a city when its heart goes dark? You get up, stretch the stiffness from your legs, and walk the circle of the temple once more, checking every angle, every gust of wind, every twitch of the flame. You're not paranoid, not exactly. You're attuned. That's what they call it during your training. Being attuned to the fire, the air, the silence. But sometimes being attuned just feels like being scared. You whisper another prayer. It's not part of the official liturgy, just something you made up in your first year. You say it every night you're on fire watch. Not for the goddess, for yourself, for the girl in the room who was buried, for the one who left, for the one who might be you. Because in the end, it's not just about fire, it's about everything that fire means. You are, by every measure of your world, not quite human, at least not in the way everyone else gets to be. You're not divine either, despite what people whisper as they press their hands to their hearts when you walk past. But you live in this strange liminal space, between gods and men, purity and punishment, reverence and fear. You walk through Rome as something other, and most days it's hard to tell whether that makes you blessed or just very, very alone. Take today, for example. The temple is unusually busy, there's a feast approaching, and the pontiffs are preparing for a major public ritual. You're helping with the offerings, laying out sacred objects on an altar so weighed down with symbolism it might as well collapse. There's incense, flowers, animal bones from yesterday's sacrifice, and a goblet filled with a wine so old it smells like vinegar and ash. Everything has to be arranged exactly, not for aesthetics, but for meaning. The gods read the signs, supposedly. If one coin is out of place or one garland droops wrong, it might spell disaster. As you work, you catch glimpses of the crowd outside gathering for the pre-ceremony. Blessings. Some faces are familiar, patricians, merchants, senators' wives in silks that cost more than a farm. Others are strangers, barefoot pilgrims, weather-beaten farmers, children gaping like you just walked out of a myth. All of them come to catch a glimpse of you. Not you, the person. You, the Vestal. You step outside briefly just before the ceremony to bless the gathered water with a sprig of laurel. The crowd hushes, eyes widen. A woman grabs her child's arm and drags him closer to the front just so he can see you wave your hand over a bowl. You could spit in it and they'd still think it's holy. That's the weird power of being a symbol. You don't do much, not in the way the soldiers do, or the senators, or the gods painted on the temple walls, but you are something that people need, and most days they need you to be perfect, even if they have no idea what that means. What does it even mean, really? You're not supposed to age, or bleed, or want, or fail. You're not supposed to laugh too loud, or eat too fast, or even breathe too heavily in the presence of the Pontifex Maximus. You're expected to hover through life like a linen-wrapped ghost, untouched by desire, immune to temptation, immune to being alive. And the strange thing is, the longer you do it, the more you start to believe the illusion yourself. But then something breaks through. It could be a memory, like today, when a boy in the crowd smiled at you with this open, unfiltered awe that had nothing to do with ritual or fear. Just wonder. And for a brief second, you felt it. A flash of something warm and human and utterly forbidden. Or maybe it's your body reminding you that you're not marble. The last time your monthly bleeding came, rare now but still possible, you cried alone in the bath, scrubbing at your skin like it had betrayed you. Because for all your sacred status, you are still flesh. The paradox is baked into everything. You are honoured but restricted, feared but celebrated, elevated above other women, yet denied everything they are allowed to do. Marriage, motherhood, choice. You're not locked in a cage exactly, but the temple walls might as well be iron bars for how far you're allowed to go. And here's the kicker. The city needs you to stay exactly like this. Rome has built its sense of order and morality around you. If you fail, if you fall, if you crack, the whole system starts to look fragile. You're not just guarding a flame, you're guarding an idea. And ideas, once broken, are hard to stitch back together. There's a lot of debate among modern scholars about what this role actually meant. Some see the Vestals as early examples of female empowerment, women given legal rights, independence, political influence. Others argue it was a gilded cage, that the freedom you had was performative, always conditional. The truth probably lives somewhere in between. You have power, yes, but only as long as you don't. Use it for yourself. This comes into focus later in the day when you're summoned to witness a land dispute between two senators, not to testify, not to judge, just to stand there. Your presence apparently ensures honesty, as if your body radiates some sort of magical lie detector energy. They argue, wave scrolls, point at maps. You say nothing, just breathe. When the dispute is resolved, they thank you, not the lawyers, not the scribes, you. You nod, bow slightly and return to your quarters. You didn't say a single word, and yet you made the difference. That's the terrifying thing about living between gods and men. You don't act, you exist, and your existence shapes outcomes you'll never fully understand. It's exhausting. By the time you return to the house of the Vestals, your head is pounding. You lie down on the cool stone bench in the garden, eyes half closed, listening to the wind rattle the olive trees. You think about the flame, about the senator's face when you stood beside him, about the boy in the crowd, about the way the crowd went still just because you raised your hand. You wonder what it would feel like to take off the veil, just once, to walk through the forum unrecognized, to sit in a tavern, to shout, to cry, to kiss someone. But then you remember what happens to symbols that stop being symbols. They get buried. So you open your eyes, sit up, adjust your robes, and go back inside. You still have evening prayers to lead, and Rome still needs to believe in you, even if you don't. It starts, as these things so often do, with something small, harmless even, a glance. You're crossing the forum during a minor feast day, walking in ceremonial formation with your fellow Vestals. You're not thinking about much. Your sandals are rubbing, the sun is merciless, the incense is giving you a headache, and then you feel it. Eyes on you. Not the usual kind, not the worshipful awe or the cautious reverence. This is different, sharper, noticing. You turn your head slightly, keeping your gaze soft and passive, and that's when you see him. A man in a dark red tunic leaning casually against a column, watching you like you're not sacred at all, like you're just a person. You keep walking, you don't flinch. But something has shifted. Later you'll tell yourself it was meaningless, that people stare all the time, that this man, this senator's nephew, as you'll learn soon enough, just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong expression on his face. But you know better. You've been trained to feel danger before it fully arrives, to notice the way the world ripples around something forbidden, and nothing is more forbidden than desire. You see him again at a banquet a week later. He's seated far across the room, at the end of a table lined with sour-faced senators and giggling noblewomen. But he sees you, and this time he smiles. Just a small curve of the mouth, but it undoes you. Because it's not mocking, it's not flirtation, it's recognition. You suddenly feel like you exist again, not as a symbol, but as a woman. Which is exactly the problem. You're not supposed to exist like that. You're allowed to eat, to walk, to breathe, but never to want. You've buried every trace of longing under layers of linen and ritual, and yet here it is, breaking through with the ease of water slipping under a door. You start seeing him more often, not on purpose, not entirely. He's there during public ceremonies, at games, at speeches, and every time he finds your eyes, just for a second, just long enough to remind you that something unspeakable is growing in the cracks of your silence. You don't speak to him. Of course you don't. That would be suicide. But you start walking slower when you pass him. You start standing just a little longer at the edges of the forum, listening for his voice. You tell yourself you're not doing anything wrong. You haven't touched, haven't spoken, haven't even smiled. But in Rome, thought is enough. The older Vestals notice first. Their glances become tighter, their tone colder. You're asked to explain your route through the city. You're questioned about your prayers. Your food is blessed more thoroughly. Your veil is adjusted by fingers that dig just a little too hard. You feel it, this slow, suffocating drift towards suspicion. And you know what it looks like when the tide turns. You've seen it. One night you find a scroll slipped under your sleeping mat. No signature. Just 3 words, written in a hand you don't recognize. He watches you. You don't sleep at all after that. There's a kind of madness in secrecy. Not the dramatic shouting in the streets kind. The quiet kind. The kind that settles in your bones when you can't speak the truth to anyone. You carry this ache with you now like a second heart. It beats faster every time you pass the red tunic man, slower every time you make it through another day without being pulled aside for questioning. But it's not just fear. There's something else blooming inside you. Something dangerous. Something thrilling. You feel alive. More than you've felt in years. Every stolen glance, every breathless moment is like flint on steel. You've spent so long pretending you were beyond human need, beyond emotion, and now that fiction is crumbling. What's left underneath is messy and real and terrifying, and you love it. You wonder if the other Vestals have ever felt this, if any of them are secretly carrying their own buried longings, if the girl who was buried last year looked at someone this way, if she was ever kissed, if she ever even got close. Maybe she died for less than you've already felt. That thought nearly undoes you. There's a curious debate among scholars about how strictly the vow of chastity was enforced and how often it was broken. Some argue that the strict punishments were a public, deterrent more than a reflection of actual behaviour. Others claim the rules were enforced with terrifying precision, especially during periods of political instability. One school of thought even suggests that some emperors used accusations of impurity as a tool for removing inconvenient priestesses, blaming desire for what was really just a shift in power. You don't know what the truth is, but you know this. If anyone discovers what's stirring inside you, no one will ask about context, or nuance, or the difference between a thought and an action. They will see one thing, a crack in the symbol, a stain on the robe, a reason to bury. So you double down. You return to your duties with robotic precision. You pray louder, walk straighter, speak less. You volunteer for overnight fire watch. You memorize every chant in the temple archives. You convince yourself you can crush this feeling under ritual. And for a while, it works. Until the day he passes you in the street and speaks. Just one word, whispered beneath the noise of the crowd. He says your name. You stop walking. Just for a heartbeat. But it's enough. You feel the air change. You hear the click of sandals on the stone behind you. Too steady, too close. You glance back, and an elder Vestal is watching. Eyes like knives. You turn. You walk. You do not look back. But you know. It's too late. You don't sleep that night. Not even a little. You just lie there, stiff as a marble carving, staring at the ceiling while every sound in the house of the Vestals feels amplified to the point of torture. The drip of water in the courtyard, the shuffle of feet during the night watch, the soft flutter of your own breath threatening to betray you. You replay the moment over and over. His voice, your name, the way the air seemed to crystallize around you. One word. That's all it took for your entire world to tilt. By sunrise, you've convinced yourself it's over. Not the feeling. That's still burning inside you like a dangerous ember, but the possibility of anything happening. You will smother this. You have to. Rome doesn't forgive mistakes, and it certainly doesn't forgive temptations. When morning rites begin, you force your thoughts deep, deep down, locking them up behind ritual movements and recited prayers. You bow, you chant, you sprinkle salt. You tend the flame with steady hands that only tremble when you reach for the fire tongs. The elder Vestal overseeing the ceremony says nothing to you, but you feel her eyes like hot brands pressing against your back. Then someone clears their throat behind you. The Pontifex Maximus steps forward. Your heart folds in on itself. He doesn't address you directly, not yet. Instead, he speaks to the assembled Vestals, his tone light, almost casual, which is exactly how you know this is bad. There will be an inspection this afternoon, he says, as though announcing a garden party. A standard review of ritual conduct. All must be present. A review. A standard review, as if you don't know what that means. Inspections are random only when Rome is calm, but the city has been tense, the omen strange, and a senator collapsed last week in the Forum. People are afraid, and when they're afraid, they look to you. They look at you. You're silent through breakfast, silent through chores, silent through the hours leading up to the inspection. You even keep your distance from the other novices, not wanting your fear to bleed into their own anxieties. You tell yourself it might not be about you. Maybe someone else forgot a line in last night's chant. Maybe a garland was hung crooked. Maybe it's a lie, and you know it. You caught the look in the elder Vestal's eyes yesterday. Suspicion, sharp and cold. By midday, the pontiffs have arrived. They sweep through the house of the Vestals with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for funerals. They check the storage rooms, the ledgers of offerings, the altars, the sacrificial implements, the temple's sacred water supply. Everything is measured, recorded, judged, and all the while you stand perfectly straight, perfectly calm, your hands clasped in front of you like a statue carved in anxious devotion. Eventually the pontiffs reach your chamber. Your pulse spikes so fast you feel dizzy. They inspect your bed, your clothes, your writing tablets. They open every chest, every drawer. They ask questions, each one delivered with that deceptively gentle tone. How have you been sleeping? Have you suffered distractions? Has your devotion remained focused? The words are neutral. The meaning is not. You answer everything flawlessly, expressionless, exactly as your training demands. But one of the pontiffs, a younger man with two clever eyes, pauses at your writing tablet. Empty, he notes, not even practice script. How disciplined. It's not a compliment, it's bait. You know better than to respond. Eventually they leave. Your room remains exactly as it was. Nothing confiscated, nothing marked. And yet you feel as though they've scraped you open with bronze utensils. The inspection ends just before dusk and you're called to evening prayers. You stand in a perfect line with the others as incense curls through the air, making the space shimmer with gold light. The rituals feel longer tonight, heavier. Every step, every word, every movement must be perfect. But your mind keeps slipping. It slips to him, the man in the red tunic, the way he said your name, the warmth in his voice. Not hunger, not arrogance, just humanity. The one thing you're not allowed to touch. After the ritual, you return to the gardens behind the house of the Vestals. It's twilight now, and the sky's the same bruised purple shade as your thoughts. You take a seat on the edge of the fountain and let yourself breathe for the first time all day. That's when she sits beside you. Lucilla, the eldest Vestal. The one whose gaze could slice marble. You were watched today, she says softly. You don't respond. You kept your composure, she continues. That's good, but composure is not protection, not anymore. Your throat burns. I haven't broken my vow, you whisper. It's the closest thing to a confession you can offer without admitting anything at all. Lucilla doesn't say yes or no. She just looks at you with something like pity. Purity of the body is one thing, she says. Purity of the heart is another. You stiffen. The vow only names. She cuts you off with a small, almost sad smile. The vow names nothing. Rome names everything. The meaning sinks in slowly, painfully. It doesn't matter what you've done. It matters what they think you've done. And right now, the city is itching for a scapegoat. Fear needs a target. Suspicion needs a body. And the house of the Vestals has lost one already this year. Lucilla reaches into her sleeve and pulls out a tiny charm. A carved wooden knot, old and simple. She presses it into your palm. For protection, she says. Not from men, from mistakes. You swallow hard. "Do I need it?" you ask. Lucilla stands, straightens her veil. "We all do," she answers, "but you, more than most." She leaves you there, sitting alone with shadows curling at your feet, the charm warm in your fist, your heart racing so fast it feels like it might break through your ribs. You look around the garden, the olive branches sway, a single oil lamp flickers near the walkway. Everything feels fragile, too fragile. You think of him again. You think of the whisper of your name, and you think of the underground chamber outside the Colleen Gate. You know, without anyone telling you, that you're standing on the edge of something, a precipice. One step toward him, one step away, and your entire life changes. Up until now, you've believed purity was about control. Now you understand the truth. Purity is about survival. You're summoned at dawn, not by a whisper or a formal knock, but by the sharp voice of a temple attendant echoing down the stone corridor like a blade. The college requests your presence. That's all he says. No explanation. No time to ask questions. You rise, still half draped in sleep and ritual linen, and follow him into the blinding Roman sun. The College of Pontiffs is meeting inside the Curia, the Senate's ceremonial heart, though most of its members aren't senators at all. They're Rome's highest-ranking religious officials, keepers of the calendar, arbiters of the gods' favour, interpreters of things like strange weather and dreams involving weasels. And today, for reasons not spoken aloud, you are being brought into their midst. They don't seat you, you stand. To your left, scribes, tablets, scrolls. To your right, the cold stares of men who've lived longer than the Republic's last hope. The Pontifex Maximus is there, of course, seated on a low dais, arms folded, face unreadable. Behind him looms the sacred calendar, a wooden board carved with the official days of business, feasts and forbidden activity. It feels like being watched by the passage of time itself. This isn't a trial. Not yet. No charges are read, no accusations named. But the questioning begins. How often do you leave the house of the Vestals? Who do you speak to during public appearances? When did you last pray at the altar of Vesta without supervision? The words are clean, sanitized, but the implications are not. They are looking for cracks, any signs of deviation, disobedience, impurity. You answer calmly. You do not tremble. Your heart is hammering, of course, but your voice stays smooth, each syllable brushed with the polite detachment of ritual. You've been trained for this. Not this exact moment, no, but the performance of innocence, the rhythm of reverence. Still, the air is heavy. You're not the only one who feels it. A murmur spreads among the scribes when a new voice speaks from the side of the room. Deeper, unfamiliar. You turn slightly and see him. A man with the look of someone who shouldn't be here. He wears the robes of a minor augur, but his tone carries the weight of someone important. "I observed her during the Feast of Concordia," he says, "when she was meant to be leading prayer." Your stomach drops. "I noticed her attention wandering," he adds. Wandering. Not a crime, not even improper, but in this room it's enough. The Pontifex Maximus doesn't speak for a long moment. Then, finally, he waves his hand. The Vestal may return to her duties, for now. The silence in the room echoes louder than the command itself. You bow, measured, dignified, perfectly respectful, and leave without haste, though your lungs are already aching for air. When you step outside, the sun feels harsher than before, like it's watching you too. Back at the temple, everything is the same fire, the same prayers, the same damp scent of ash and olive oil and old stone. But you are not the same. You've been marked, not officially but spiritually. They've seen you now, not as a symbol, as a suspect. That afternoon you were approached by a scribe, not one of yours, not someone from the temple. He slips into the courtyard with a confidence that suggests permission, though you've never seen him before. He hands you a sealed message, plain parchment, no crest. You hesitate. Then, despite every warning screaming in your skull, you open it. It's not from the man in the red tunic, it's from someone else. The note is short, 6 words. You have friends in high places. You fold the parchment, slip it into your sleeve and say nothing. Later, when the temple is quiet, you unseal the letter again. You study every stroke of the ink, trying to decode the voice behind it. What does it mean, friends? Is this a warning? A promise? A threat disguised as protection? This, you realise, is how the real power in Rome works. Not in decrees or votes, but in whispers. In favours and glances and favours owed. You've been taught that your role is above politics, but everything around you says otherwise. You decide to speak to Lucilla again. You find her trimming laurel branches in the sacred garden, her veil pulled low. You approach quietly, respectfully, like a student. She listens as you describe the meeting, the questions, the accusation. She says nothing for a while, then, "They are watching because they don't know what else to do." You frown. "What do you mean?" Lucilla binds the laurel in a bundle. There is no war to fight, no plague to blame, no clear enemy. So they look inward, and when Rome looks inward, it always finds a woman to burn. You swallow. Do you think they'll try? Lucilla finally meets your gaze. It doesn't matter what I think, only what they believe. That night, as the temple slumbers, you sneak into the archives, not to steal, not to destroy, but to read. You pull scrolls from the shelves, records of past investigations, stories half remembered. You read about another Vestal centuries ago who was accused after smiling at a messenger, another who was tried after being spotted near the docks. None of them confessed, all were punished. But buried in the scrolls is one rare, quiet victory, a Vestal who stood trial and was exonerated. The flames never wavered, the omens cleared, the gods apparently forgave her, and Rome uncharacteristically let her live. Her name was Aelia. The records end there. No mention of her after. But you remember. Because sometimes history doesn't need to shout. It just needs to whisper, quietly enough for one girl to hear through the centuries. So you whisper, too, to yourself. I am not finished yet. It burns. Not the sacred fire. You've been tending that long enough to know how to avoid singeing your hands. No, this burn is internal. It's the weight in your chest that hasn't lifted in days, maybe weeks. Every breath feels like it costs too much. Every glance, every silence, every ritual, weighted. The kind of heaviness you can't see, but you can feel in your teeth. And still, the flame blazes. That morning, you step into the temple of Vesta, your veil crisp, your posture perfect, and your expression blank in that sacred way you've practiced since childhood. The fire's golden light dances along the marble walls. Smoke trails gently into the oculus above. The scent of laurel and ash fills the air like a promise you didn't make but are expected to keep. You kneel and begin the day's rites. Your hands move smoothly, muscle memory at this point, but your mind won't quiet. This fire has burned for over 1,000 years. That's the figure people always repeat. A millennium of uninterrupted flame. It's not just a number. It's a boast, a superstition, a lifeline. The symbol of Rome's endurance. The city may fall into chaos, the emperors may come and go, but the flame remains. That's what the people believe, what they need to believe. Because if it ever goes out, really goes out, it's not just a logistical failure, it's a cosmic one, a breach in the pact between Rome and its gods. And when that happens, the stories say, Rome ends. Which brings you to the unthinkable. What if the flame has gone out before? You're not supposed to ask that. Ever. But once the question slips in, it's hard to unthink it. Especially now, with so much around you fraying. The glances, the whisper, the inspection, and that letter. The idea that not only could the flame have gone out, but that the empire may have simply covered it up, wrapped the truth in ritual and started it again in secret. Sacred fraud. You've begun noticing tiny details. A slight variation in the fire's movement. A colder spot near the altar where it should be warm. The way one of the priests muttered a chant with a single word wrong, and no one corrected him. Maybe you're imagining it. Maybe not. Rome is good at hiding its wounds. You decide to speak to one of the attendants, not a priest, but an older servant who's been cleaning the temple floors since before you joined. His name is Tarsus, and he never talks during ceremonies. But he sees everything, sweeps it all into piles. Quietly you ask, has the fire ever needed help? He doesn't look up from his broom, just grunts. Help? You know what I mean. Tarsus hesitates. Flame's flame, he says at last. It flickers, sometimes strong, sometimes lazy, sometimes needs coaxing. You want to ask more, but the conversation is over. He shuffles away like he's never said anything at all. That night, during your turn at fire watch, you sit beside the hearth and stare into it longer than usual. The fire burns clean and high. Perfect. Sacred. As it always has. As it always must. And yet, what if it's not the same fire? What if it's been restarted a dozen times, and the continuity is just a story? There's a theory you read once, in a forbidden scroll you weren't technically supposed to see. A fringe scholar argued that the flame wasn't meant to be literal, that the original fire was an idea, fides, the trust between people and gods, that the physical flame only became sacred when Rome grew hungry for symbols. And maybe that's true. Maybe the fire is just a stand-in for Rome's desperation to believe it matters. But that doesn't change your job. You feed the flame anyway. You stir the coals. You whisper prayers, even when your faith feels threadbare. Because what else is there? You are the guardian of something larger than truth. You are the continuation of belief itself. That's your real job. Earlier in the day, a group of schoolchildren visited the temple. It's rare, but during certain festivals, the public is allowed glimpses. They peered. Inside the sanctuary, eyes wide, mouths full of questions. You were standing near the altar, preparing the laurel offering. One girl gasped and pointed. "She's real," she whispered. "I thought they were statues." It struck you. To her, you were a myth made flesh. That's what you are now. A living symbol of something that may no longer exist. You're not a girl, not a woman, not quite divine, just a placeholder in white robes for the Rome that was, or maybe wants to be. You look around the temple, the same walls, the same echo, the same fire, but you're changing. The last few weeks have cracked something in you. You're still performing the rituals, still walking the sacred routes, still tending the fire, but the veil feels heavier, the silence sharper. You can no longer pretend this is purely about faith. It's about control, ritualized obedience, national theatre, and if the fire ever does go out, you no longer believe the gods would be the ones to strike you down. Rome would. Because this isn't about Vesta anymore. It's about order, about fear, about making sure someone is blamed when things go wrong. So you sit beside the flame, bathed in its glow, and you ask yourself the question you've avoided for years. What would happen if I let it die? Not that you will. You won't. You couldn't. But still, the thought slinks into your mind like a shadow. If the fire is fake, if the flame is just a lie, then maybe you are too. You stand. You whisper the final prayer of the night. You tend the fire with the precise number of laurel twigs. You bow. You leave. The flame continues to burn. For now. When the knock comes, it isn't soft. It's not one of the usual quiet summons passed through whispers or veiled gestures. No, this one is loud. 3 hard raps on the stone lintel of your doorway, like a fist pounding a warning into the bone of the temple itself. You sit up in bed instantly, heart already racing, hands numb. It's too early for morning rites, too late for fire watch, and far too deliberate to be anything else. Something has changed. You're led by torchlight through the sleeping temple, past the flickering shadows of the atrium, and into the open courtyard where 3 figures wait. 2 guards in ceremonial armour, and in between them, a man in deep crimson robes. Too fine for a common priest, too polished for a soldier. You recognise him instantly, an emissary of the emperor. Not one of the public-facing flatterers, one of the silent ones, the ones who speak only when they're delivering commands or cloaked threats. "You've been summoned," he says, "by the emperor himself." You nod. You don't ask why. You're not allowed to. You're dressed in the formal white robe and high veil by the senior Vestal, who avoids your eyes the entire time. Her hands move with practiced grace, but her fingers tremble when she pins the final infulae to your hair. You want to ask her what she knows. You want to ask if you should be afraid. But instead, you say the ritual words, "I serve the flame," and she answers, "And the flame serves Rome." You're escorted through the forum under the early light of dawn. It's empty now. No merchants shouting, no senators striding self-importantly, No children chasing chickens, just cold stone and long shadows and that feeling in your spine that you're walking towards something you can't walk away from. The Palatine Palace is quiet as you enter, which is worse than if it were buzzing. You're not brought to the throne room. Instead, you're led down a long corridor, past statues of emperors who no longer matter, into a private chamber draped in heavy red fabric and warmed by a small brazier. The emperor is already there, sitting, waiting, alone. He's younger than you expected. More tired, too. His eyes look like they haven't closed in days. His robes are heavy with gold thread, but his posture slumps, like the empire itself is weighing down his shoulders. He gestures for the guards to leave. They do. You are alone with the most powerful man in the world. And then he speaks. "You've been causing problems," he says, not unkindly. Not publicly, not yet, but quietly. You remain still. You say nothing. "There are whispers," he continues, "about divided loyalties, about softness." He leans forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't care about glances or feelings or whatever nonsense drives the priest to panic." You blink. He smiles, tired. "I care about order." You open your mouth, close it, then carefully ask, "Why summon me?" "Because I know what you are," he says. "What the Vestals are." He stands and begins to pace. "You're not gods, you're not saints, you're tools. Tools to keep the city stable, to keep the people obedient. If you start cracking," he turns sharply, "the illusion breaks." "So this is a warning, you ask?" "No," he replies. "This is an opportunity. You don't understand. I want to keep things as they are," he says, "but I need your cooperation." He steps closer. "You will continue your duties. You will appear calm, composed, perfect, and in return, I will protect you. From what, you don't ask. You already know. And if I refuse, you ask, your voice steady but small. The smile fades. Then Rome will bury another symbol and find a new one to polish. He lets the words hang there like smoke in the brazier. When you return to the temple, the sun is higher. People are beginning to wake. The city is stirring, but you feel detached from it all, like a ghost walking through a painting. You nod to a servant. You greet the younger Vestals with the same rehearsed warmth you always use. But inside, something has shattered. You are now part of the machine in a way you can no longer pretend not to see. The Emperor doesn't care about faith, or the gods. He cares about optics, about balance, about the illusion of stability. And you? You're one of the last props holding up a system that's already creaking. Later you sit alone in the temple staring into the flame. It flickers and curls, beautiful as ever. You think of how many lives have been sacrificed to keep it burning. How many girls were buried not for crimes, but for convenience. How many times the fire was probably relit in secret. The failure covered with layers of incense and ritual and lies. And now you've been asked to join the performance. Officially. You're not sure whether you're disgusted or relieved. Maybe both. Because the truth is, part of you wants to survive. You want to keep your life, your place, your power. You want to keep walking through the forum while people bow and whisper and believe. But what does it cost? Your silence, your complicity, your soul. The following morning, during a small public rite, you stand before the people with the other Vestals. You offer the ritual prayers, you gesture over the sacred bread, you smile with just the right degree of serenity. No one can tell that something has changed. But it has. Now, when you stand between the gods and the people, you understand what you really are, not a bridge, a wall, and the Empire is very, very good at keeping walls in place. You used to believe that time inside the temple was sacred, somehow untouched by the rest of Rome. Outside, things shifted. Emperors rose and fell, plagues crept through alleyways, the Tiber flooded and receded. But within these walls, you imagined a stillness, a timelessness. It was one of the first lies you ever told yourself, and one of the last you were willing to let go. Now you can see it clearly. The rot is here too. You notice it in small things at first. The rituals are still performed, yes, but with less attention. The elder Vestals are more distracted. One of the younger girls stumbles over a line in the daily chant and no one corrects her. During your shift at the fire, one of the priests forgets to bring the correct oil. Instead of going back for it, he mutters, "It doesn't matter," under his breath and tosses on the wrong blend. You say nothing. Because that's what you do now. You say nothing. Ever since your meeting with the Emperor, your body has moved on schedule, but your soul hangs back in the corner of every room. You go through the motions like a ghost of yourself. You are still a Vestal Virgin, technically. You still wear the veil, recite the words, bow when you're supposed to, but you're no longer innocent, not in the eyes of Rome and not in your own. And then the unthinkable happens. The flame flickers. Not like before, those little trembles that are easy to dismiss. This is different. You're standing before it, alone in the pre-dawn dark, just as the city begins to wake. You add a laurel twig, say the prayers, and suddenly the fire stutters, shrinks, coughs. Your breath freezes. For a full 3 seconds you stare into the heart of the fire and watch it collapse in on itself, curling into smoke and shadow. Then, mercifully, it reignites. Not from your hands, not from any ritual. It just flares back up, too quickly, too cleanly, as if it were never gone. You don't move for a long time. Your body is still kneeling, your hands locked in prayer, but your mind is miles away trying to rewind time, to convince yourself it was just a trick of the light. Just your imagination, a momentary lapse, a breath in the wrong direction. But deep down, you know, the fire went out, not fully, not for long, but it happened. You are the only one who saw, and if you tell anyone, you'll be the only one who burns for it. So you stay silent. You finish the morning rites, you prepare the offerings, you smile when the other girls join you in song. But inside, something is breaking apart, slow and deep, like a crack running through the foundation of your soul. You consider telling Lucilla, but what would she say? You already know. She'd tell you the truth wrapped in metaphor, offer a cryptic warning about belief and survival, and remind you, once again, that the illusion of the flame is more important than the flame itself. But you don't want illusion. You want truth, even if it's ugly, even if it's dangerous. That night you walk to the edge of the garden after prayers, past the olive trees, past the wall with the carved inscription naming every Vestal for the past 100 years. You trace your finger over the names, the ones who ended in honour, the ones who didn't. You know yours could be next, for any reason, or no reason at all, because now you're carrying 2 secrets, the one the Emperor placed on your shoulders, and the one the fire whispered into your bones. And secrets are like kindling. It only takes one spark. There's a theory, barely spoken, rarely written, that the fire doesn't just represent Rome's soul, it contains it. That somewhere, buried beneath the hearth, is a relic from the founding of the city itself. Some say it's a piece of the original hearth of Aeneas. Others claim it's the ash of the first sacrifice made to Vesta. Still others believe it's something far older, something no one dares name. You've read all the fringe ideas, in hidden scrolls, in pages that crack when you unfold them. Some of them read like madness, others make too much sense to be comfortable. The flame may have gone out before, more than once, and every time it was relit in silence. But that silence doesn't cleanse anything, it stains. You think about the man in the red tunic. You haven't seen him since the Emperor's warning. He's vanished from the city as if erased. Maybe he was. Maybe he was sent away, or silenced, or buried beneath a pile of paperwork so deep he'll never be heard from again. You think about writing him a letter, but you don't. Because what would you even say? I saw the fire go out. I can't pretend anymore. I think Rome is rotting from the inside and we're all just walking through the smoke like it's incense. You do the only thing you can. You double down. You perform the rituals with near maniacal precision. You chant louder. You bless more offerings. You smile wider. You stand straighter. And no one notices. Because in Rome, as long as the performance continues, no one questions the script. The flame still burns. And so do you. Inside, at least. Every hour you're awake, something is being consumed. Your peace, your faith, your sense of place in the world. You are a furnace of belief, fueled by doubt, kept alight by fear. This is what it means to be sacred, to be hollowed out by expectation and filled with fire that isn't yours. And still you kneel, and still you pray. because you are what they need you to be, even if it kills you. You stop talking as much. Not that you were ever loud, but now even the younger Vestals notice. They glance at you sideways in the courtyard, whisper to each other in corners when they think you can't hear. You catch the word changed once, floating through the colonnade like an accusation. And it's true. You have changed, but not in the way they think, not because of a man or a scandal or even the Emperor's thinly veiled threat. No, what's changed is simpler and far more dangerous. You've started seeing the truth, and it won't let you look away. The truth is that the whole world around you is a costume, a tightly wound performance wrapped in white linen and soot and godly silence. The fire went out, just for a moment, and nothing happened. The sky didn't crack, the forum didn't crumble, the gods didn't strike the capital with lightning. Life continued, as if the fire never mattered at all. You think about that constantly now, how thin the line is between sacred and pretend. One afternoon, you're called to participate in the Vestalia preparations, the annual week when Rome opens its gates to mothers and wives, inviting them into the temple for blessings of fertility and home. It's usually the gentlest time of year, no sacrifices, no tense rituals, just sweet-smelling flowers, open doors, and the low murmur of prayers drifting like mist through the streets. This year, though, something feels off. Maybe it's just you. You light the incense and smile at the women as they file in, each with her own worries tucked behind her eyes. Some bring their babies, others clutch fading fertility charms, worn smooth from desperate prayers. These are not the rich women you usually see. These are the ones who keep the city alive without ever being seen. They kneel before the altar, and you offer the blessing, as always. Your hand makes the sign, your mouth speaks the words, but this time you find yourself watching them, not as a servant of the goddess, but as a person. And they look back. For the first time in a long while, one of them meets your gaze directly. A woman in her 30s, sharp lines around her mouth, eyes that have seen more than any priest ever will. She doesn't bow, doesn't whisper. "You look tired," she says softly. That one simple phrase slices through you. You want to laugh, or cry, or say, "Yes, I am tired. I'm exhausted from pretending that all of this still means something." But you don't. Of course you don't. You only offer her the same smile you've given thousands of times and move on to the next woman in line. But the seed has been planted. Later, you walk through the forum, trailing behind the other Vestals, your presence meant to show Rome that all is well, that the flame burns, that the gods are pleased, but everywhere you look you see the cracks. A collapsed statue cordoned off with ropes, a market brawl breaking out over spoiled grain, a priest in too bright robes, shouting a blessing no one is listening to. And high above it all, the marble faces of forgotten emperors staring blankly down, still holding power they no longer deserve. This empire is decaying. You can smell it. But no one wants to admit it. So they paint the walls, polish the altars, and keep feeding the fire like it's not burning their fingers. Back at the temple, you take your shift at the sacred hearth. You kneel again before the flame that almost died. You feed it wood in measured handfuls, whisper the same words you always have. But now you know better. Now you wonder what would happen if you stopped. Not just for a second, not an accident, but on purpose. The thought comes more often now, like a shadow in your mind. You tell yourself you would never, but the word never feels thinner every day. There's a growing debate among scholars, even now, centuries later, about how much power the Vestals truly had. Some believe you were political players behind the scenes, using your status to influence events. Others see you as figureheads, imprisoned in ritual, never permitted to change the course of anything. But none of them can agree on one key point. Did the Vestals ever choose to rebel? There are no records of it, not official ones. No stories of fire left untended or rites left unfinished out of protest. But maybe that's just the nature of history. Maybe the ones who refused didn't survive long enough to be written about. Maybe they were buried before they could speak. You begin testing the edge, quietly, carefully. You let the flame flicker longer before adding oil. You skip a single word in a minor prayer. You rearrange a bundle of laurel in a way that violates tradition by a hair. and nothing happens. No lightning, no earthquakes, no divine punishment, only silence. That's what unnerves you the most, that the silence feels like permission. One night, you sit beside the flame long after your shift ends, staring into its heart. The glow bathes your face in gold. You remember the stories they told you as a child, how Vesta herself sits in the fire, watching, judging. You used to believe it, used to imagine the goddess looking back at you through the flames, eyes full of eternal wisdom. But now you just see fire, heat and light and smoke. No eyes, no judgment, just the empty machinery of belief, kept alive by girls like you too afraid to let it stop. And still, you sit. Still, you feed it. Because even now, even after everything, part of you is afraid of what would happen if you didn't. Because maybe it's not just a symbol. Maybe it's not just smoke and superstition. Maybe if the flame goes out, Rome really will fall. And maybe, just maybe, it already is. The longer you keep the secret, the heavier it becomes. Not just the fires flicker, that terrifying moment you saw the sacred flame stumble and reignite, but everything that's happened since. The Emperor's warning, the whispers from the college, the disappearance of the man in the red tunic. It all loops in your mind, sleepless night after sleepless night, until it feels like you're walking through molasses, or sinking in it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe you're supposed to feel this slow drowning. Maybe being sacred means learning to sink with dignity. But lately dignity is slipping too. The rituals begin to bleed together. You forget which day you're on. You catch yourself repeating words twice or starting a prayer too early. Once, you almost walk out of the temple without relighting the secondary offering lamp. A minor detail, yes, but one that would have once mortified you. Now, you just correct it and move on like everyone else. No one calls you out. No one says a word. Because silence has become the greatest ritual of all. You start to realize the others know more than they let on. Lucilla watches you more closely now. Not with suspicion. Something worse. Pity. She's known from the beginning that this whole system is held together by the soft glue of denial. She's older, wiser, steeped in years of watching girls like you come into the temple full of fire and hope, and leave either empty or not at all. One afternoon, she joins you in the garden. You're tending a rose bush, though truly, it's more a performance than anything else. Your mind is far away, probably in the fire again, or somewhere deeper. She doesn't say hello, just sits beside you and starts picking at the weeds. I used to think, she says after a while, that keeping the fire meant safety, that as long as it burned, nothing bad could really happen. You don't answer. You just pluck a yellowing leaf. But the fire doesn't protect us, she says. It consumes us, one by one, quietly. She turns and looks at you, and in her eyes is a kind of resigned clarity that hits you like a slap. The only question is, will you burn on your feet or on your knees? That night you dream of fire, not the contained, neat flame of the temple, something wilder, a great roaring blaze consuming the forum, licking at the statues of gods and men alike, reducing scrolls to ash, eating marble and gold, and the false smiles of the Senate. You stand in the centre of it, untouched, arms wide, watching everything fall. When you wake, your hands are shaking. You bathe in cold water before prayers, trying to ground yourself, but the image lingers. You half expect to see soot on your skin. In the following days, strange things begin to happen, not publicly, not visibly, but in the quiet margins where truth tends to hide. The chief priest overseeing the temple suddenly resigns. No explanation. A new one steps in, more rigid, more watchful. The older servants are rotated out, younger ones brought in. Their eyes are sharp, but not reverent. They aren't here for the gods, they're here for you. Scrolls in the archives go missing. The ones you used to read late at night tucked under your robes, the ones that questioned the sacred timeline, that hinted the flame had died before. Gone, without notice. And finally, you're approached by a man in the forum. Not a priest, not a senator, just a man in plain robes, walking a little too close to you during a public procession. He leans in just enough to whisper, "Your name is being prepared." Then he's gone. swallowed by the crowd. You don't need anyone to explain what that means. You've seen how it's done. The quiet start of a trial, the slow build-up of evidence, fabricated, bent, or conveniently discovered, the ritualized phrases, the accusations wrapped in concern, the public declaration that Rome must be protected, and then the sentence, burial, not in earth, not in fire, not in public, but beneath the ground in a chamber made just for you, where you will starve in silence while the city pretends to mourn. You don't sleep that night either, but you do make a choice. It happens sometime around the 3rd hour before dawn. You're in the temple again, of course. Where else would you be? The flame is quiet tonight. Too quiet. You kneel before it, breathing shallowly, thinking about everything and nothing at once. And then you move. Not dramatically, not rebelliously, just differently. You reach for the laurel, but your hand hovers. You murmur the prayer, but your lips fall silent halfway through. You stare into the fire, and you do nothing. For 5 minutes, then 10, then 15, you just wait. Let it fade, you think. Let it go. If this whole empire is a performance, maybe the greatest rebellion is dropping the script. But it doesn't die. It flares brighter, on its own. You stare. Something primal crawls up your spine. A chill. Not fear. Something deeper. You thought the fire was just a symbol. A trick. But maybe it isn't. Maybe something is watching. Not the goddess. Not Rome. Something older. Something patient. The flame dances. And suddenly you feel like a child again. Small. Mortal. Temporary. You don't know what to believe anymore. But you know this. You're not ready to die. Not yet. So the next morning, when Lucilla finds you in the cloister and asks, "Have you decided?" You look at her, and for the first time in weeks you answer clearly. "Yes," she nods, doesn't ask what the answer is, because she knows. The first step in your plan is the simplest, and yet it feels like heresy. You start writing again. Not prayers, not chants, not ritual words carved into wax tablets that get filed away in the temple archives. No, this is something different. You steal scraps of parchment from the storage room, just enough to go unnoticed. You dip your stylus in borrowed ink and begin, late at night, in the silence of your chamber with only a single oil lamp flickering beside you. You don't even know what you're writing at first. Just thoughts, fragments, memories. Truths that would destroy you if spoken aloud. The fire went out. The emperor is afraid. Rome isn't sacred. It's just good at pretending. Each sentence feels like a small rebellion, and each one makes your heart beat faster. But once you start, you can't stop. The words spill out in a way that feels dangerous and cleansing all at once. For the first time you begin to feel like this life, this quiet suffocation wrapped in linen and ritual, has edges, maybe even cracks. You don't write your name. You don't need to. Anyone who reads this, if anyone ever does, will know exactly who you are. You hide the pages behind a loose stone near the inner fountain, a place rarely disturbed, especially during colder months. You know it's risky. If you're caught, there will be no trial, no burial, just erasure, but you do it anyway. Because if you're going to burn, you want your ashes to say something. The next part of the plan is trickier, observation. You begin to pay attention in ways you hadn't before. You notice who's watching you. Not the casual stares of the public, but the ones that linger too long. A new priest, for example, who always seems to appear near your shifts at the sacred fire, pretending to check the altar arrangements. Or the girl assigned to assist you during blessing rites, the one who fumbles with the offerings a little too often and apologizes just a little too sweetly. You're being watched. Closely. Which is why you make a show of normalcy. You smile when you're supposed to. Recite your lines with clarity. Kneel with perfect posture. During a public rite, you even volunteer to carry the sacred salt across the forum, an honour usually reserved for the more senior Vestals. When the people cheer your name, you bow low, the very picture of piety. You don't miss the approving nod from one of the senators standing at the temple gate. Let them believe you've submitted. Let them think you've chosen survival through obedience. That's what you want them to think. Because what you're really doing is listening. In the stillness of the archives, during your appointed hours of copying texts, You begin to overhear things, whispers between priests. One of them mentions the phrase, preparation orders. Another mutters about purification before judgment. The same words were used during the last trial. You remember them too well. They're planning something. You don't know when. But it's close. There's a storm brewing behind the rituals, and you can feel the barometric pressure of Rome's fear. This isn't just about you. This is about the city's desire for control. And so you begin the third phase of your plan, the quiet gathering of allies. Not many, not openly, just enough. Lucilla is first, of course. You don't need to explain anything to her. She's already chosen her side. When you tell her your plan, not all of it, just enough, she doesn't blink. "What will you do if they come for you?" she asks. You swallow. "Make it difficult." She nods. "Good. Rome prefers easy sacrifices." The next is a scribe, a boy, barely older than you, who's been assigned to document ceremonial proceedings. He has ink on his fingers and too much curiosity in his eyes. One evening, when you're both in the scriptorium, you drop a single sentence into conversation. "What would happen if the fire died?" He glances up, startled, doesn't speak. But the next day you find a copy of a banned scroll left under your tablet, a treatise questioning the divinity of household gods. No name, no signature, just a message. You're not alone. And finally there's the public. You don't speak to them, of course. That would be unthinkable. But you walk among them more often now. You request to perform more ceremonies outside the temple. You bless the animals before festival games. You visit market stalls to receive offerings. You let them see you. And slowly you begin to notice a shift. There are murmurs when you pass, a different kind of awe, not the blind reverence that used to cling to your every movement. Something more human, understanding, because they too are waking up. Rome is growing tired of its own perfection. The people can sense the weight of the mask. They see how the empire demands sacrifice not just in battle but in silence. They feel the fault lines beneath the marble streets. And some of them, like you, are beginning to wonder if the gods would really care if the illusion broke. You're not trying to start a rebellion. You're not trying to end the empire. You're just trying to survive with your soul intact. But maybe that's enough to be dangerous. The night before the next full moon, you kneel before the fire once again. It burns clean, bright, steady. The same flame as always, the same heat, the same golden dance. And yet, you no longer see it the same way. You don't see purity. You see pressure, expectation, fear dressed in holy light. And you know it now, fully and without doubt. If Rome demands your life, you will not go quietly. You will not walk willingly to the chamber beneath the Colline Gate. You will not let your story be turned into another hollow warning carved into stone. You will speak. And if that means everything burns, then let it burn. The next morning arrives like the beginning of a war, even though the sky's clear and the city hums with the soft rhythm of routine. Distant carts roll over the stones of the forum, robed men argue mildly outside the Senate steps, and a pair of boys chase each other past a shrine to Mercury laughing. It's a perfectly ordinary Roman morning, and that's what makes it feel so unnatural, because everything in you says today is the day. You feel it before it happens, not because of a vision, not because of an omen, but because your body knows. It knows what it feels like when the walls start closing in. When you're no longer a question in the minds of powerful men, you're a decision. They don't come for you with torches and trumpets. That would be too loud, too messy. Instead, it's two temple attendants, dressed in simple grey tunics, who come to your chamber at midday and tell you with no emotion that your presence is requested for purification rites. Purification. That word again. You nod, say nothing. But your throat dries out anyway. You feel your hands tremble slightly as you reach for your veil, adjusting it with the same care as always. Only now, the ritual feels like armour. Or maybe burial robes. You can't tell the difference anymore. Lucilla is waiting in the inner garden when you pass. She doesn't speak, just gives you the faintest tilt of her head. But you see it. You feel it. It's goodbye, maybe. Or maybe not. You don't let yourself think too far ahead. The attendants lead you, not to the sacred spring where normal rites begin, but deeper, toward the back of the temple complex where ancient stones mark the original foundations of the sanctuary. You've been here only once before, Years ago, during your first year of service, when everything still smelled like rosewater and eternity. Now it smells like cold dust. You descend a narrow stairwell, your sandals skimming worn steps, and enter a dim chamber lit by just one oil lamp. A priest is already waiting, hooded, silent. He nods to the attendants, who leave immediately. The heavy door clicks shut behind you. You are alone. No, not alone. There's a second figure here, hidden in the shadows. Slowly she steps forward, and you realise with a strange pulse of recognition that it's one of the senior Vestals from years ago, retired, long thought dead or sequestered in private devotion. But here she is, alive, eyes sharp as obsidian, hands folded in front of her. "Sit," she says. You do. What follows is not a trial, not officially. There are no scrolls read, no accusers, no ceremonial audience. This is a prelude, a reckoning behind closed doors. Rome prefers its verdicts delivered before the theatre begins. You've been seen, the old woman says, not doing anything wrong, but thinking it. We know. You don't respond. You won't give them the satisfaction. There are those, she continues, who believe the flame is in danger, not because of gods, because of you. You hold her gaze. Then let it die. She doesn't flinch. Careful. There are ears in every wall. You speak like that again, you'll be buried by nightfall. Then bury me, you say quietly, but don't pretend it's for the gods. There's a long silence. The priest behind her shifts slightly. The elder Vestal walks to the centre of the room, hands clasped behind her back. There are 3 options, she says finally. 1, you confess. We let the trial play out. You go with dignity. The public sees it. They move on. The flame continues. You stare. A lie. Yes, she agrees without shame, but a useful one. 2, she says, turning back to face you. You vanish. A sudden illness. A quiet transfer to another temple far from Rome. You live out your life in silence. The city forgets your name. The flame remains untouched. And the 3rd, you ask, her eyes narrow. You become more sacred than ever. You blink. Perform, she says. Not just better, perfectly. You step back into the world and shine so brightly that even suspicion is blinded. No hesitation. No more flickers. You embody Rome so completely that the memory of your doubt becomes impossible. A long pause. You want me to become a symbol, you say. You are a symbol, she replies. The only question is which kind. They won't kill you yet. That's what you're learning. Not because they believe in you, but because they're not done using you. The meeting ends without ceremony. The old woman disappears as silently as she arrived. The priest escorts you back to the surface without a word. When you step outside, the sun stabs your eyes. Rome is as loud and alive as ever. A wedding procession passes in the street below, musicians playing flutes, children throwing petals. You inhale deeply, letting the heat settle back onto your skin. Now you know, the performance isn't for the people, it's for the power behind the curtain. So, you begin again. For the next week, you are flawless. You kneel beside the flame and your hands don't shake. You walk through the forum like your feet never touched anything but marble. You bless every olive branch and salt cake with the gravity of a goddess. They stop watching you as closely. The new attendants are reassigned. The young priest disappears. The tension loosens. And still, every night, you write. Your scroll is longer now. A record of truth, of fire, of fear. You keep it hidden still, though part of you wonders what might happen if someone found it. Part of you hopes someone does. Because even if you shine now, flawless, brilliant, untouchable, you know what you really are underneath. Not a symbol, not a saint, a spark, and sparks catch. You wake up before the bells, before the servants stir, before the first pink thread of morning unspools across the marble tiles of your chamber. The temple is silent, not the silence of peace, but the silence of something held too long in the chest. Today feels different, charged, the kind of day that hums beneath the surface like flint waiting for steel. You dress slowly, deliberately, wrapping yourself in the full ceremonial robes reserved for the most sacred rites. White linen, tightly folded, crimson cords looped around your waist, veil pinned perfectly, framing your face like a statue's, impassive, immortal. When you fasten the last tie, your reflection in the polished bronze mirror doesn't even look like you. It looks like an idea. That's the goal. Today is the final festival of the year, the closing rite of Vestalia. The people will gather. The Senate will watch. The Emperor may even make an appearance seated high above the forum with his expression carved into something between reverence and authority. And you will lead the final prayer. It's not the first time you've done it, but it's the first time you intend to say more than the words they gave you. You walk through the temple complex, slow and regal, every movement practiced and precise. The younger Vestals fall in line behind you. Lucilla nods at you once from beneath her veil. No words, no expression, but you feel her approval like a cloak settling over your shoulders. Outside, the city has dressed itself in celebration. Garlands hang from columns. Children run barefoot through the temple square holding ribbons. Traders have set up stalls filled with honey cakes and blessed wheat. There's laughter, music, the soft clink of gold coins. Rome looks alive. But underneath the perfume and ceremony you can smell the same thing you've smelled for months. Fear. Not just yours, theirs. The people are afraid of what happens when symbols break. The priests are afraid of losing control. The emperor is afraid of the quiet rot seeping through his empire's golden bones. And today, you are the fulcrum. You reach the front steps of the temple and climb them slowly, deliberately. The sacred flame burns beside you, housed in its bronze cauldron. It looks strong, eternal, but you know better. You saw it flicker. You saw it go out. The crowd falls silent. Thousands of eyes fix on you, their sacred vessel. You raise your arms, begin the chant. The words are old, so old they no longer mean anything in Latin. You recite them anyway. Then, at the final line, you pause, and you speak. Not the prayer, not the ritual script. You speak your words. There is no flame without breath, you say. No holiness without blood. No purity without choice. A ripple moves through the crowd. The priests shift. The senators glance at each other. Lucilla does not move. I have served Vesta since I was a child, you continue. I have tended this flame with loyalty, with faith. And still, the city looked for reasons to bury me. Murmurs now. Not just surprise, confusion, anxiety. The gods did not speak. You say louder now. But Rome did. Rome judged. Rome threatened. The emperor rises slowly. He doesn't speak, but his presence alone tightens the air. I do not say this to destroy. I say it to remind you. Belief is not obedience. Worship is not silence. And fear is not sacred. Gasps now. Audible. You know the words you're saying can't be unsaid. You know they're enough to have you dragged into the earth before sunset. But your voice doesn't shake. Not once. You turn to the sacred flame. Reach for the laurel branch. Hover. Then lower it. You don't feed it. You just watch. The entire forum holds its breath, and the fire keeps burning, steady, bright. No divine rage, no sudden darkness, just fire. You look out over the crowd, and this time you see something different in their eyes. Not devotion, not scandal, not shock, recognition. They see you, not as a symbol, not as a vessel, as a person. Later the priests will try to contain the moment. They'll say the speech was part of the ritual, that it was poetic flourish, not defiance. The emperor will remain silent as always. The Senate will release a statement praising your depth of spiritual insight. But you'll know, and so will they. Back in your chamber, long after the incense has faded and the crowd has dispersed, you retrieve the scroll, the one you've been writing all this time. You add the final lines. The flame still burns, but now I do too. You seal the scroll. Tuck it behind the stone again, not for yourself, for whoever finds it next, because someone will. There will always be another girl, another spark, another moment when the ritual stumbles and a choice must be made, and when that moment comes, maybe she won't feel so alone. Outside, Rome moves on. It always does. But inside the temple something has changed. You have changed. And whether they admit it or not, the city felt it. You were supposed to be buried, but instead you lit something no one can extinguish. Wind down. 300 words. So now the fire sleeps. Not gone, not forgotten, just resting. Like Rome itself, curled in the quiet spaces between legend and truth. Somewhere out there, the temple still stands in ruins. Ivy creeps up the stone where your bare feet once stood. The altar is cold, the sacred flame long extinguished. And yet, there's something about the way history moves, quiet and slow at first, like a whisper, then louder, faster, until it crashes through the centuries, reshaping what came before. Your story, yes, your story, is part of that motion now, not carved into monuments, not declared by senators, but remembered, maybe not by name, maybe not by marble, but by the feeling you left behind. A spark. Because sometimes that's all it takes. One breath of rebellion in a room full of silence, one moment of truth spoken aloud where only obedience was expected, one girl who chose to see. They told you your life was about tending a flame, but they were wrong. Your life was the flame. And somewhere, someone will find that scroll behind the old stone near the fountain. Maybe a scholar, maybe a child, maybe another girl who's tired of pretending. She'll read your words in the flickering lamplight and realise she's not alone. She'll know the fire went out once, and the world didn't end. It just began again. So now, it's time to let go. Close your eyes. Let the city fade into moonlight and memory. Let the marble fall silent. Let the stories sleep. For now. You've carried the flame long enough. It's okay to rest.